China can outproduce us on everything, but they could never have gotten into the American market unless Walmart, Target, and all the others acted eagerly to be the distributor of those
All right.
Chinese goods and to make a fortune for themselves along the way. Those are the realities. The rest is make believe. Nobody wants this war in Ukraine. Above all,
Let's
the
go.
people of Ukraine who are suffering beyond all words.
I still
the
have some
destruction of
tricks
their
up my
society.
sleeve.
Who's benefiting out of this?
No
I mean,
fear.
American weapons
it's
manufacturers.
grotesque.
For the Empire.
Excuse me?
I said American weapons manufacturers are.
They're already dead.
It seems like those with the
Perfect.
least to lose and the most to
For
gain
the
out of this
Empire.
are the ones that are pushing for
For the Empire.
it and pushing for the continuation
For
of
the
it.
humans.
Whether it be Boris Johnson back when he
Let's
was the
kill
prime
the
minister
enemies
going
of the
into
Empire.
Ukraine during the first
So
round of peace
bad to do.
negotiations or
All
possible
right.
ceasefire and peace negotiation talks that were
Silent
happening,
and faithful.
organized by Turkey, or whether it be
Come on.
Ned Price and numerous other American State Department
Let's
officials
kill the enemies of the
continuously talking about
Empire.
how they are not interested
Come on.
in peace at all. Obviously, there's an argument here about what Ukrainians want,
All right, let's
and
turn
some
this.
will say that, well, the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians want to keep fighting this fight, but ultimately, we are not giving Ukrainians everything they want. It's not like
I
we're,
love it.
implementing Article 5. We're not, we're not even giving Ukrainians
blow up some
F-16s. We're not training them on that. We might
All
down
right.
the line, I think, but so
Okay.
far, these are demands that they've made that we haven't
For the humans.
conceded to. So, I think that
No
pushing
fear.
for peace negotiations on that front
So
with
glad to
China
do it.
and Russia at the other side of the table, with
For the
Ukraine and the
Empire.
United States of America on one side of the table would be the quickest and
Those
most swift
heads
way to
are calling
try to
for a
stop
bullet.
this conflict and
Silent
further bloodshed from continuing.
Well, I mean, let me just expand one
The
dimension
party has
of that
just
point.
begun.
We now have a defense
For
budget,
the
depending a little bit on
humans.
how you look at it, in the neighborhood of 850
Perfect.
billion to $1 trillion.
Okay.
If you take a look, it's
Anything
more
more?
money than the next 8 or 9 countries in the world combined spend on their
Of
military.
course.
We have just authorized
love
an
it.
additional 100 plus billion dollars
go.
just for the war in Ukraine. Even if you believe that one
there it
motivation
is.
for the Ukraine war is the money being made by the defense industry, we already
Nice.
are doing more than anyone in their right
Come on.
mind could ask to provide them with a profitable business.
Okay.
Over $1
the
trillion.
Empire.
I don't even think they're that greedy.
I still have
They're
some
getting
tricks
a
up my
bundle, a
sleeve.
big bundle with no
Yes.
opposition. Nobody opposes
For the
the
Empire.
defense budget. I mean, a handful of people, but it's basically
already
trivial.
dead.
The two parties that run our politics are
No
both eager to
Of
outdo
course.
one another in supporting the defense
So
budget.
glad to do
They're in very good shape. They
Let's
don't
go.
need another $100 billion war on top of the
Okay.
gift that this one represents. So
Come
for
on.
me, I don't think it's
Of
even them.
course.
I wouldn't mind criticizing them
Let's
if
go.
I
And he
thought
moved
it, but I don't see.
in his next
They're already,
upgrade.
they've made a ton of money by all the stuff we've shipped to Ukraine, and all of that will have
Let's
to be
kill the
replaced.
enemies of the
They will get the
Empire.
money and the profit out of that.
They're already dead. All right. Yes.
The budget
Yes.
is huge, and it got a
Come on. Of course.
Good one, guys.
tremendous boost. Look, I'm an economist, and two things have happened in the last year that strike me as downright funny. We are in a supposed war.
All right, so that is
against
on and
the
functional.
inflation. in our country. And to that end,
that's
we have a Federal Reserve, our central bank, that has raised interest rates. And that's supposed to slow down
Those
the
heads
spending
are
by
calling for a
individuals and
bullet.
businesses because they can't,
The
it's too
party
expensive
has
to borrow
just
money at
begun.
high interest rates, etc.,
This is going
etc.
to be fun.
What's the worst thing you can do
No
to an inflation? Pour money onto it. It's like
No
squeezing
fear.
kerosene on a campfire. It flares up. It's
So
a stupid thing
glad
to
to
do.
do it.
What have we just done? We have just spent an extra
For the Empire.
$100 billion on a war in Ukraine.
For the
Most of that money
Empire.
goes right back into the American economy because it
So
pays for the
glad to do it.
military one way or another. And Mr. Zelensky is not stupid. He understands you better spend that money back in the United
Okay.
States and not in some other country, because that will be the
Excellent
fastest
ideas.
way to cut that
For the
game
humans.
over, number one. The second thing we did
Okay.
when our banks started to
For
collapse
the
a couple of weeks
humans.
ago was to say that the Federal Reserve is going to come in and
For the
give any
Empire.
bank in trouble losing deposits, they
I
can go to the
still have
Federal
some
Reserve
tricks up my
and borrow
sleeve.
brand new money
Let
to
me
replace
blow
the
some
deposits.
heads.
Well, let me explain to you. If the deposits go
Empire.
from a troubled bank to an untroubled bank,
So
that's still
glad to
money
do it.
circulating in our economy. If the
Let
Federal
me
Reserve
blow up some
backstops
heads.
banks by pumping more money in, then you've got a bank crisis leading to more money and a war leading to more money. You're not slowing down the inflation that way, you're making it worse. What's my point?
For
It's
the
obvious. No one discusses it in this country. No one is saying, wait a minute,
For
we
the
got to
Empire.
think about the inflationary. If we
I still
propose
have some tricks
to
up
help
my
the food
sleeve.
stamp recipients for another 6
right.
months, the issue of inflation would be raised.
Yeah, that's a moral hazard. It's only a moral hazard
sounds
as it
good.
pertains to the working poor when you're helping the working poor. It's never a moral hazard when you're helping bank.
Oh, he's watching Hassan. Really? So, right now y'all are watching someone with bad takes. Well, some bad takes. Watching someone else with bad takes who's reacting with even worse takes. This is just bad takes all around. Anything you learned watching me watch this, just ignore it. Watch the game or ask me something.
Bankers get golden parachutes in the aftermath
No
of the
problem.
2008 financial collapse.
For the Emperor.
So what you're basically, just to make it a
Fast
little bit
and
easier to
silent.
understand for our audience here,
No
am I
fear.
correct in stating
Of
that
course.
we have two methods
kill
of
the
dealing with the
enemies of the
inflation: monetary
empire.
policy and fiscal policy.
For
Fiscal
the
policy
humans.
conducted by the legislative branch, which is usually just completely powerless, with the exception of the bipartisanship that they always find when
Let's
it
go.
comes down
That's
to more
easy.
money for the military. And then the monetary
the
policy is
empire.
also one that you can use, and
That's
it's
easy.
pretty much the only one that
Great.
you can use, unfortunately, because there is no such deflationary fiscal policy that the Republicans or the Democrats will ever allow.
I hope not
So
to
they're
find a
utilizing
heartbeat.
that the control over the inflation by controlling the
They're
interest rate
already dead.
with the express
No.
purpose of depressing wages,
Okay.
kicking people out of jobs,
Yes.
with the hopes that like inevitably
So
people will
glad
be
to do it.
this tight labor market will turn back around and you will have a labor force that's willing and able to take less
Those
pay
heads
for the
are
same work.
calling for a bullet.
Yeah, and again,
I'm gonna have to say, main reason Hassan's takes are actually so bad is because he's just can't keep himself from making that propagandistic tone of voice, like absolutely demonizing the other side just through the tone of his voice. Can't just speak about them objectively. Honestly, he's not even capable. Destiny, at the very least, is capable of being objective. He hates it, but he can do it.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but again, I'm
The
astonished.
party has
I'm an
just
economics
begun.
professor. I'm astonished that the only way we are discussing as a nation dealing
Let's
with
go.
the inflation
Yes.
is by raising interest
For the
rates,
Empire.
which will throw millions of people out of work. And everybody knows that.
No
Which
fear.
will probably hurt the poorest amongst
So
us
glad
most,
to do it.
the last hired, the first hired, all of that
For the
again,
humans.
worsening the disparities of
For
our
the
racial community,
humans.
of our ethnic community, of the genders,
Not
and
sure,
on
but
and
let's
on.
do it.
Really, we're going to go through
Let's
that?
kill the
I'm a
enemies of the
professor.
Empire.
I learned that there are other
No
methods of dealing with inflation.
Can we talk about that?
do-
Can we talk
that
about
do
that?
not involve raising interest rates. I'm mystified
Sounds
why I live in a
They're
country
already dead.
where the people in charge know what I just said and they refuse to discuss it. We have a country in which raising
For the
interest rates
Empire.
is considered like the thing, the only thing, and all that's left for us
I
to
still have
discuss
some
is
tricks
how
up my
many
sleeve.
percentage points
Let
it'll
me
go up or
blow up
down,
some
how
heads.
soon. Let me drive it home in a personal way.
Those heads are
People seem to
calling
like
for
this, so I'll
the
Did
tell
you even
you
hear
this
what
story.
Hussam said?
I got my PhD in economics at Yale University. At the time I got it,
Hassan actually debating someone. That would be more interesting.
it was almost all men who were students. Women didn't go into economics then. They do
The
much more now, but
party has
they didn't
just
then.
begun.
So there were 2 or 3 women in my
No
class,
problem.
and we all got to know them because there were only 2 or 3 women in my class. And one of
For the
them,
Empire.
who took the same courses I did,
Perfect.
in the same
For the
classroom I did,
Empire.
from the same professor
course.
I did, was a woman you've gotten to know. Her name is Janet Yellen.
More the merrier.
So I know what she knows. She knows what I know. We were schoolmates. We went to the same graduate program. In that program, we learned that one of the most interesting ways to stop an inflation
me blow
that
up
has
some
been
heads.
used in many countries at many times, often with great success. And that was used August 15,
Is he gonna find a way to- is it gonna be
1971
tax the rich?
by the
It's gotta be
sitting
tax the rich.
President Richard M. Nixon.
Great.
He got on television and he
Those
said to the
heads
American
are calling
people,
for a bullet.
we've got a terrible inflation, here's how we're going to deal with it. As of right now, as he was speaking on radio and
the
TV,
party has
any
just
business that
begun.
raises its price, we're going
For
to
the
come for you,
humans.
we're going to arrest you, and you're going to jail.
All
Any
right.
union or other
course.
worker organization that pushes or tries to push the wage up, we will do the same to you. This policy is called in this country a wage price
That's easy.
freeze. In other countries, it's called an incomes policy because it freezes the income of the employer and the income of the employee at the same time, wherever it happens to stand. That was originally put into effect for
Let's
90
kill
days.
the
It was
enemies of the
extended.
Empire.
It brought the inflation down. It is an alternative. It has its strengths and weaknesses, just like raising interest rates, but they're different. And an
Right.
honest society trying
the
to deal
Empire.
honestly with its problems would have a
So
debate
glad to do it.
publicly about these alternatives. And by the way, there are
Fast
others I could
and
give you if you
silent.
were interested. It's not the
No
only 2.
fear.
There's more than 2. But we live in a society that has a
No
quick
fear.
dismissal.
That's
If they even
So
admit what I
glad to
just
do it.
explained to you, which is
So how would freezing wages and freezing income stop inflation? Well, intuitively, it would stop inflation because it just stops all change in the economy. So that implies having enough control over the economy to do something like that. And for America, with the capitalist setup, no one really has that much control over the economy. Well, except for the banks. Reasonably speaking, it might be possible for them to do that if they all coordinated. But there's too much competition going on, so they're not going to coordinate. I don't see how his idea can be implemented here in America.
In every history book and can be verified in 10 minutes of Googling anything. There's no excuse for what's going on. Just like breezily dismissing the Ukraine war by saying the Russians and the Chinese don't offer to sit down and have a ceasefire. Both of those countries have done it. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they'd cop out once you started the process. But we're not in a very good position to call them bluffers if we haven't called the bluff. And if we're willing to sit down without conditions, why don't we say so? And I don't think you can use the argument about what the Ukrainians want, because here I'm not interested in criticizing Mr. Zelensky. But you should know, if you don't, that he has shut down opposition newspapers, opposition media, opposition politicians. He's fighting a war. Maybe you have to do that in war. But there is no way to know what the mass of the Ukrainian people feel unless you want to take the fact that somewhere between 6 and 7 million of them have left the country, and it's not that big a country, and that would not be a sign that you would want to make a big argument about, that this shows that they're in favor of fighting to the last Ukrainian, since they've made a choice not to be among those last Ukrainians that we're fighting for. So it does strike me as there's an awful lot of accumulated evidence that we're not dealing honestly and straightly with these major problems of our society, and that's usually the sign of a society that is scared shitless, if you pardon my Spanish, and therefore is functioning with a level of anxiety that is scary to watch.
Getting back to fiscal policy and monetary policy, you talked about some things that have demonstrably worked, like the Nixon price freeze. For contemporary America, for contemporary American society, do you have any suggestions on fiscal policy that would be deflationary? And can we even implement these policies?
Absolutely.
All right.
The first policy that would be deflationary, and it is long overdue, is raising taxes on corporations and the rich.
Oh, there it is.
If you want it very concrete, reverse the tax cuts that were passed in December of 2017. The biggest single economic act of recent history was that tax cut. That is what produced the $1 trillion deficits we've had ever since.
For the Empire!
Okay, I'm bored. I'm good on that. All right.
Of course. For the Empire.
I can never tell. I feel like with a lot of laptops, I feel like the hardware is good.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like laggy to like drag windows around and shit. And I don't know if it's because of like the weird shit that they package into laptops, or if I should just do like a clean Windows install, but I don't know if that'll fuck with shit.
Perfect.
Wow, there's some serious range on those grenades.
I still
You know what
have
kind of
some
stuff you're gonna
tricks
talk
up
about?
my
It's probably gonna be
sleeve.
the fucking
Understood.
trans shit.
Yes.
That's my guess. And then,
Good quality.
I don't know.
Good quality. That's
Really
easy.
have to have that voice over in different tones.
Interesting.
You know the Nixon price freezes were trash, right? I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough.
Yeah, it makes sense that the
That sounds
price
a lot of
freezes
fans.
are trash.
That's a lot. The fans are pretty high, right?
Price freezing sounds like stagnation, and stagnation never works.
But no.
Technically, by definition, stagnation can't work. It is the act of doing no work.
And it's not like I'm running a ton of shit on this laptop.
All
Did you
right.
check the armory crate thing? Yeah.
Come
but, like,
on.
what the fuck am I supposed to do with that?
Okay.
Oh, and it wants to update already. Okay.
Come on.
key. Moody Booty alert. And
Understood.
smashes it.
Yes. Yes. For the humans! So glad to do it. So glad to do it. Let me blow up some heads. Let's kill the enemies of the Empire. No fear. Let me blow up some heads. So glad to do it. For the
It's so laggy,
humans!
but I don't think it's Twitch. I think it's just his laptop right
For
now.
the
It's not using-
Empire!
Okay, what's he doing? Hitting a blue buff.
No fear!
What the heck is that?
I can fucking not, dude.
He misses.
I cannot.
Love it. No.
All right,
fear.
that's enough of this. I'm gonna see what kind of news Tim Pool covering. Here. Bye.
Following the tragic story on Monday, Democrats took their preferred route in response by saying we should take away your rights, your human rights, because a criminal did a bad thing. It seemingly makes no sense to anyone who cares about civil rights, but this is the preferred path of Democrats. In response to this, Rep. Bowman, a congressman, began yelling in the
Not on the fence in regards to gun rights myself, but I believe the right to defend yourself certainly should be absolute.
rights, but this is the preferred path of Democrats. In response to this, Rep. Bowman, a congressman, began yelling in the halls of Congress as Republicans walked past Thomas Massey.
And if the right to defend yourself should be absolute, then yes, you should have the right to the means of self-defense.
We're a big fan of Thomas Massey. Stopped to actually talk to him, but instead he just yells, creating a viral moment, which, unfortunately, brings up another important point. They don't care. It's performative outrage. There will be nothing done on this matter. The Democrats don't actually ever propose anything that will solve these problems. And even when they come out and claim gun control is the answer, what they do is they propose banning some arbitrary item that they will say, we're taking action because our voters said do something, so we're going to ban a Blabo booth gun modification. And it's like, what? What are you banning? What does it, huh? Here's how it works. So the Democrats are like, we should ban assault weapons. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? And they're like, weapons are weapons of war. And you're like, all weapons can be used in war. Are you talking about assault rifles that are already heavily regulated under the NFA and damn near impossible to get? I guess it's got to be it's got to be like a 1980s earlier model. What's the proposal? Oh, the proposal is it can't be black and it can't have a pistol grip and a foregrip or a folding stock. And you're like, wait, what? What does that have to do with what happened? This person used a Kel-Tec Sub 2000, a 9mm carbine. Well, you know, we're going to ban. Here's why. They want to say they did something. So, for you, ladies and gentlemen, you can have a Ruger 1022 with a rifle grip and a 100-round drum, and that's fine. But you put a pistol grip on it, now it's an assault weapon. Does it make sense? See, the problem is these Democrats in these cities don't know anything about guns. And as such, when they hear we're banning assault weapons, the Democrats are like, yay, and they clap and they vote for it because it sounds like something is happening, but it's not. What we're getting is actually just performative outrage in this viral video of Jamal Bowman just yelling nonsense. And I will break down that argument, and I will show you what the Republican Thomas Massey has to say, and then we'll talk about real solutions to these problems. Because the Democrats, they're not offering them. But before we do that, my friends, we're actually sponsored this time around. Go to surfinginternetsafe.com and download Virtual Shield. I don't usually do sponsor spots on this channel, and actually haven't in a very long time, but Virtual Shield is the first sponsor I ever had, and they requested it, and I said, much obliged. Virtual Shield is helping bring you this video. It's a virtual private network service that provides a basic layer of security for you as you browse the internet. So if you're worried about your data being stolen by governments, corporations, or hackers, this is a basic layer of security. I always say, we don't expect people to break into our homes, but we still lock our doors and windows at night. This is effectively the same thing. So go to surfinginternetsafe.com and get a Virtual Shield VPN for $8.33 per month. It also helps you bypass censorship. When different countries or actions are taken to try and stop your internet connection, a VPN can help bypass unconstitutional measures. So again, Surfing Internet Safe. Now, let's get back to this news, and let me play for you this video. And, well, it's loud, to put it mildly. Here we go.
At all. Cowards. Pressure them. Force them to respond to the question, why the hell won't you do anything to save America's children? And let them explain that all the way up until Election Day on 2024.
There it is. Right there.
All right, here's the question. Why aren't you doing anything to save America's children? And guns aren't taking guns away isn't the solution. Pandora's box is open. Come up with something real.
Election.
And let's see. In fact, can't be a hypocrite here. Let's come up with something real right here, right now. Let's see. The typical conservative solution is that guns shouldn't. That teachers should be armed, and there should be guards at school locations. And there is some rumor going around that that shooter chose that location because it was a softer target and intentionally wanted to go after a different school. Of course, that's a little iffy since I also heard a rumor that the trans individual, the shooter, was meeting with a preacher, and that preacher is a member of that school. So I'm going to go with they picked the target they wanted to. That school was the first target. Anyways, and there's some historical data showing that as the laws were passed to keep guns out of schools, shootings at schools increased because softer target, more emotional people, and Pandora's box is open, they're going to find guns. So, really the most significant issue is one of the more moderate conservative positions, mental health care. Something that the left is supposed to be in favor of, but when guns are brought into the issue, they get too emotional over it and want to get rid of the guns without considering the mental health of the shooter whatsoever. Not gonna work. It's just them pushing ideas in action that will have no effect. Honestly, like all politicians.
Day 2024. That's the only thing he cares about. Because no matter how many times we actually try to explain, they don't care. They don't listen.
Let them explain it all the way up to election day on 2024. They're freaking cowards. They're gutless. We're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been
I'm talking about gun violence.
that allows
Some hair.
Carry guns, more guns lead to more death. More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby.
You're carrying water for the gun lobby. Congressman Bowman, if your solution to a problem of criminal activity is to suspend my rights, I will do everything in my power to make sure people do hear that up to election day and they don't vote for you. But whatever, you're in a Democrat district where they'll probably vote for a glass of water if there's a D slapped on it. How's that, Nancy Pelosi?
Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more deaths. Are you listening to what I'm saying?
States with open carry laws have more deaths. Let's look that up then. Okay, Hawaii is an island and doesn't count because it's so far away from the mainland that it actually has the option of closing the Pandora's box. Let's see if I can find any information any details here. California. A little further away from the middle of America. That might be believable. But California doing better than Hawaii? Now that's not making any sense. Extreme risk laws, aka red flag laws. removing guns from those serious threats to themselves and others, something that a mental health professional should be able to find. And rejecting stand your ground law. I'm not a hard line on stand your ground, but I think castle doctrine is reasonable. Oh, let's compare gun violence versus overall non-gun violence. Okay, but do you have to say rifles? I want all guns, not just rifles. But there we have it. More people die from unarmed assaults than from rifles. And with that one search, this entire narrative is falling apart. All right, back to Temple's video.
In what has to be...
Children dying. 9-year-old children. Because the solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? Have you ever worked in a school?
So let's pause right there. He says 9-year-old children are dying. I'm wondering if Rep. Bowman is in favor of the medication of young people that results in many of these circumstances, because we never talk about that, do we? See, the Democrat policy is drug up the young people, but just make sure they can't have guns. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, hold on. How about we don't drug them up? We try and figure out what's causing these problems. Yes, we shouldn't give them guns, but suspending my rights? I am not diagnosed with any mental illness. I am a sane, rational, logical, law-abiding citizen who simply wants to protect himself. Why should I lose my rights because of the actions of a few?
Have you ever worked in a school? Have you ever worked in a school? Is he yes or no question? Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk. Okay, I'll bring it down. All right. Have you ever worked in a school? I've got to be able to reveal. I worked in a school for 20.
All right, we're going back and let's research the murders in by capita states. Kentucky, alright, that's going to be a red state. Montana, South Dakota. Oh, South Dakota has Chicago, doesn't it? Through it. Yeah. Is that right? Man, my geography sucks. The map. Oh, right. This is Brave. Why would South Dakota have that? Because now I'm seeing. I was wrong about the geography there. Yeah, Chicago's over here. And now I feel stupid. Yeah, Illinois. Why would South Dakota have a rapid increase in deaths as opposed to North Dakota? This looks like the only city. I have no idea. Oh well. Looks like the New York City is the only worse one outside of these really strange outliers. Well, Kentucky isn't too much of an outlier in my perspective. It's these two that are weird. New York City is second, right behind Washington, D.C. Well, that political hotbed. Well, not gonna lie. Homicide rates in these states are winning out. Oh well. Sure how their gun deaths compare, but I'm going back to this instead.
Years. I was a teacher. I was screaming before you came and interrupted me. I worked in a school for 20 years.
What Thomas Massie is saying is that there has never been a school shooting at schools where teachers are allowed to carry. And in fact, on Monday we learned that the shooter actually had another location in mind, but upon seeing armed security decided not to attack that location.
As I said, that doesn't quite make sense compared to other information I have.
That the shooter actually had another location in mind, but upon seeing armed security decided not to attack that location.
I was in school 20 years. I was a teacher, I was a school counselor, I was a middle school principal.
None of this means anything. I don't care if you work in school. My rights are not up for your vote because criminals do criminal things.
Every day of my career.
It's time. We've got guns here to protect us. The kids should have somebody to protect them. Every school that's allowed it has never had, not even an accidental discharge in any of the schools. So.
I just love the I don't know, it just feels so fake, all of it. I feel like Bowman was yelling and it was nonsense. And you want to know how I know it's nonsense? Because when they controlled all of it, when they had the House and they had the Senate and they had the presidency, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. It's performative. They don't want the problem
they
to go
didn't
away.
do anything.
The Democrats like the fact that these things happen because it gives them an opportunity to grandstand but never actually get anything done. They know the Second Amendment won't allow them to get rid of guns. They know that criminals will take these actions, and they like to play these games where they're like, you know, we can't solve this problem, says only country where it regularly happens. Just literally not true. And then what they do is they try and compare the entirety of the 330 million people in the United States to, like, Denmark. Like a country of, you know, how many people live in Denmark? 6 to 8 million? Sweden, 8 million people. It's like we have 330 million. They compare a single nation in the European Union, which is more comparable to a state. They don't actually care about looking at what's really going on. But what I see here with this, I'm going to go for it. I just see another example of why this country is headed towards a civil war. And a lot of people think the phrase civil war is too hyperbolic, but they're saying it on The View. On The View, Billy Porter is like, we're in a civil war already. Then he goes, a civil war of the mind. Jane Fonda called for murder. What we're seeing here is performative outrage by Rep Bowman. Clearly doesn't know anything about guns. Clearly doesn't know anything about how to solve these problems. Screaming about the election because he wants to win power, not actually seeking to address the problem at hand. So let's address the problem. I'll get into this before we get into the larger story here. How do you stop school shootings? Well, you don't. You don't. Guns can be 3D printed. Answer the questions. Where are the leftists talk about 3D printed guns? Very advanced. Anybody can make one. They don't have answers. Guns can be 3D printed. And that means if you want to limit the damage done by psychopaths, you need armed guards. Perhaps that will prevent many school shootings. The reason why I say you can't is that you can't stop an individual with no record and no history from 3D printing a gun and then going nuts. You can't stop them from getting a baseball bat or any other weapon. You can't stop it. Now, in the short term, in the long term, you could, if you had a cohesive moral foundation of your country and culture. But these people believe in multiculturalism, which means you're going to see people who have varying ideologies and feel justified in taking these actions because we do not have a shared moral foundation. That's multiculturalism. This is what comes with it. Now, I actually agree with Thomas Massie. How is it that banks don't even have cash anymore. They have armed guards. But children don't? We use armed guards at train stations, but not for children. Here's my proposal to Rep. Bowman. Let's do this. Instead of arguing, just why don't you, in your district, in your jurisdiction, ban the guns? Now look, I'm all for the Second Amendment, right? If you want to live in this place where they keep voting for these people, I say we take the guns from your banks, from your courthouses, from your train stations, because, like you said, guns, open carry places have more death, right? Okay, well, let's get rid of all the guns. If government employees in schools can't have guns, why should government employees in train stations have guns? I propose this. We use Bowman's district for an experiment, as it were, to see if he's right. And if he believes this is true, then I think it'll work out for the best. What we'll do is, in his district, we take away all the guns from the police, the courthouses, the train stations, all right? Nobody can have guns. All right. Then, in Thomas Massey's district, we will give teachers the right to keep and bear arms, or better yet, armed guards at these schools. Then, we just simply sit back and wait a few months and start collecting the data. Now, of course, I'm of the opinion that what would happen if you did that is there would be a lot more death in Bowman's district. Yeah, I'm assuming this based on living in Chicago, where guns are heavily restricted, but criminals don't care. They do whatever they want anyway. Taking away the guns didn't solve any problems. It just made it so that people who are apt to commit crimes will be armed, and those who wish to defend themselves will not be able to. And that brings me to the weapon that was used by the shooter. It was a Kel-Tec Sub 2000. I believe that's what it's called. And it's a 9mm carbine rifle. This means it's a rifle that shoots handgun rounds. I myself have a 9mm carbine. They're fantastic. And there's a great thread on Twitter explaining why it is a very good and important weapon. You see, people were saying on Twitter, there's no reason for anyone to have that weapon. And it just goes to show these people don't know anything about weapons. Why would you want this? Well, if you're worried about overpenetration, because you live in a house with other people, then you would want probably like 9mm hollow point or something like that, maybe frangible, so that when you are in your home, you have the aided stability of a rifle with a handgun round that doesn't overpenetrate. It makes perfect sense for home defense. It's great. I guess they would suggest that we use, what, 223 or 556? Those things are going to rip right through those walls. That could be dangerous. We don't want that. Now, granted, I think you should choose, whichever weapon you think is appropriate, because all weapons are great for defense, whichever one they may be. And you have a right to defend yourself. If Bowman doesn't want to defend himself, I say he give up any armed security and armed guards and put his money where his mouth is, because more guns means more death, right? Here's the ultimate problem with all of this. The Democrats keep pushing policies that are making the problem worse. And in response to the problems, they push policies to make the problem worse. What happened on Monday? A mentally ill woman took a gun, went to a school and a church, and killed children. There's no sense in any kind of political motivation. Nothing makes sense. Whatever the political motivation is, why kill children? Well, the left has already celebrated that, saying they were future fascists. Maybe that was the motivation of the shooter. We're hearing the manifesto will be released as soon as the FBI are done putting together a profile. But what I see here is a troubled young person. I mean, 28 is not super young, but a troubled individual. And the Democrats seek to affirm this mental illness. This person was clearly depressed, suffering from anxiety, seeking something. And the Democrats say, affirm it. Affirm it. Agree with them. Give them what they want. Well, when that doesn't solve their problems, it reminds me of The Sixth Sense. Remember that movie? The opening scene, man, it's like been a very long time since that movie came out. It was like 20-some odd years. The opening scene, child psychologist, played by Bruce Willis, is in his room with his wife, and there's a dude naked in his underwear holding a gun, because when this person went to Bruce Willis and said, here's what I'm suffering from, Bruce Willis just affirmed them, placated them. Now, I shouldn't say affirmed. They said, okay, we're going to treat you, but they didn't do anything. This person, their problem was not solved, and that's a theme of the movie. So what we see here are troubled young people who aren't actually having their problems addressed. And there are so many. The chemicals, the plastics, the PCBs, phthalates, etc., endocrine disruptors, things that are twisting and warping our minds, a demented culture that affirms people who are suffering depressive episodes and then gives them medication, which actually makes it worse. The funniest thing is, I see these commercials where it's like, are you depressed? Take this drug. Drug side effects include suicidal ideation. And it's like, wait, what? You ever notice that? That some of these antidepressants have a side effect of suicidal ideation? Well, then what's the point of taking the drug if it's supposed to stop this? I think Democrat policies actually exacerbate the problems. Take a look at this story we have from the Post-Millennial. California moves ahead with state-sanctioned kidnapping bill that would allow therapists to take children from families without notice or provocation. Do you think a 12-year-old who is suffering, being taken from their family and put into the state foster system, is going to become a well-adjusted individual? In all likelihood, the system will likely break this person. Here's a Post-Millennial reports. A California Judiciary Committee heard testimony on Tuesday for and against a bill that would allow a mental health professional to place a child as young as 12 in a residential shelter facility without parental knowledge or consent, and without there being any prior allegations of incest or abuse. Assembly member Wendy Carrillo said that she was proud to present AB 665 to expand access to mental health care for young people as communities face a mental health crisis. But Aaron Friday, attorney and co-founder of parent group Our Duty, called the bill state-sanctioned kidnapping. It is. It is. And so what I see from this, we have got a clear cultural problem. Young people are suffering. Not all of them. Some of them. There are young people suffering. The Democrat response, put them in the system, medicate them, effectively making the problem worse. I'll tell you what young people need. Discipline, hard work, sunshine, and exercise. It's not a solution to all problems. Sometimes people are genuinely suffering from a chemical imbalance or some other physical episode which results in mental issues. I believe that there are medications that can help them. But I believe a large portion of young people who are suffering depression, anxiety, hyperpolarization, they're scrawny or obese, they are out of shape, they are dejected, they have nothing to look forward to, and the mental illness is brought about by a decaying culture. Humans have expectations. We are not free from the environment. We are a part of it. And a part of human development was conflict. Those that worked hard survived. Now with all of that being stripped away, you get people with no purpose. They're listless, confused, bored. Why am I here? This results in self-harm. It also results in hyperpolarization. When these people have no purpose and don't know why they're alive, someone hands it to them. Or if they don't find it, they just lose their minds. Democrats offer them up drugs instead. The drugs don't seem to help, they only seem to make things worse. And then, when something goes wrong, they say, I know, let's strip the rights of law-abiding American citizens. Now, homie, don't play that. I'm not going to sit back and entertain Democrats wanting to take away our rights because of criminal activity. And Bowman could have introduced a bill, they could have passed a law a long time ago, but they don't. They don't. It's performative. We had someone on the show, I can't remember who it was. It was a member of Congress, and they said that, who was it? They said that when they're trying to repeal Obamacare, they actually have Republican leadership come to them and say, don't do it, don't repeal it. You're the deciding vote, don't repeal it. Because we need the issue to campaign on.
All right, now I think I got all that stuff I watched earlier. Read earlier. Of course, blue cities and red states. All right.
Because they are all crooked, it's what they do. And Thomas Massey's a good dude. I don't know if his solution is the absolute solution. Having armed teachers at schools sounds simple. I'm not so sure I'm in favor of that. I think teachers should be allowed to carry the same as anyone else should be allowed to carry. And I think that there should probably just be armed guards at these schools. That's it. Should be a choice that these schools choose to make. The problem with Democrats is that sometimes things exist. I don't see them coming out and saying, how do we ban tornadoes? And the response is, you're saying there's no way to stop this, just ban the guns. 3D printed guns exist. Banning them won't get rid of them. Next question. People can easily make their own guns. They did it in Egypt. You cannot ban guns. But they don't get it. And I think it's because they don't want to get it. They want to campaign. So, keep up the performative outrage, I guess, Bowman. If you really cared, you would actually sit down with Thomas Massie and talk about solutions. But you don't care. You want to yell in the halls of Congress to raise your profile like you're doing right now so you can get reelected. Congratulations, it works. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.
Of course. It absolutely ass blasted.
Anything more?
I don't think so. Oh well.
Be one of the funniest videos I've seen in a long time. The creator of Libs of TikTok confronts Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for lying about her in Congress and delivers an ethics complaint. Now, you don't need me to give you that story. We'll play the video before getting into the finer details, but we have this video from Libs of TikTok, Chaya Raichik, telling AOC outright, you're a liar. And let me play this video because it is epic. Here we go.
Super transphobic, and I never want to share space with you. Thank you.
I am here outside the Cannon building. I was here last week because I attempted to ask AOC why she lied about me in a committee hearing. She cowered away. She refused to talk to me. So I'm back here today, 1 week later, and I'm going to deliver her an ethics complaint that I filed for lying about an American citizen in a committee hearing.
So AOC broke the rules. Believe it or not, there's actually rules on Capitol Hill. And 23 Clause 1 is the big one. You got to act in a way that reflects credibility on the House. And lying about, a U.S. citizen certainly doesn't do that. So we're filing this ethics complaint.
Let's go inside and see if she's there.
A little too performative.
Dropping off some mail for the conversation.
Hi. So basically, a few weeks ago, AOC lied about me in a committee hearing. Okay. So I tried to come last week and talk to her, but she kind of cowered away, wasn't interested in talking to me. So together with Mike from the Heritage Foundation Oversight.
Look at this confused lady.
He helped me file this ethics complaint, so we filed that. And if you can give it to AOC,
she's just
I would
stuck
really
in the
appreciate
middle
it.
of all this with
And
no
tell her
idea
to
what's
stop
actually
lying about
going on.
American citizens. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, have a good one.
Dropped off an ethics complaint at AOC's office, and unfortunately she wasn't there. So we left, and then I was walking through the Capitol, and guess who I bumped into? AOC herself. I just delivered an ethics complaint to your office because you lied about me in a community hearing.
Yeah,
so
actually,
I never inspired a bump for
no, you're actually super transphobic, and I never want to share space with you. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Here's the story from Fox News. AOC faces ethics complaint from Heritage Foundation for defaming Libs of TikTok creator. Basically, AOC said that she inspired a bomb threat. She lied. Let's read the news. The Heritage Foundation this week asked the Office of Congressional Ethics to open an investigation into Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for falsely accusing and defaming the creator of Libs of TikTok, Chaya Raichik. Heritage's complaint notes that in a February 8th hearing at the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, Ocasio-Cortez claimed that Raichik lied in a 2022 tweet by saying Boston Children's Hospital is now offering gender-affirming hysterectomies for young girls. That tweet was a response to a video of a doctor who was talking about hysterectomies, although the doctor never discussed the age of patients. Quote, "Are you aware that from August 11th to August 16th, that the account posted false information about Boston's Children's Hospital, claiming that they were providing hysterectomies to children?" Ocasio-Cortez asked a former Twitter executive about Raichik's tweet. "And are you aware that this lie was then circulated by other prominent far-right influencers?" Heritage's complaint argues that with those other statements, Ocasio-Cortez violated a House ethics rule by knowingly and intentionally defaming Chaya Raichik, creator of the viral Libs of TikTok account, falsely accusing her of lying and disseminating disinformation. The 9-page complaint defends Raichik's views that Boston's Children's Hospital performs gender-affirming hysterectomies on young girls. Aside from being the premier pediatric hospital, Heritage noted that the hospital's website notes it performs gender affirmation surgery to eligible adolescents, and that the Journal of Clinical Medicine has documented that the hospital has performed 65 double mastectomies on minors over the course of 3 years. Other material collected by Heritage shows that gender affirmation surgery has been performed on patients as young as 15. But the hospital quietly changed its website to reflect that genital surgeries are only performed on patients aged 18 and older. And I just want to pause real quick and point out that Jazz Jennings, the famous trans kid, was a minor when they received bottom surgery, if you want to call it. Now, I will stress that Jazz Jennings did not have genitals because of puberty blockers, which inhibited the growth. And thus, they did not have the material typically required to perform a penile inversion vaginoplasty. And they had to use stomach lining to create a, I don't know what you call it, right? They call it neovagina. But it's, look, it's one thing to do a penile inversion vaginoplasty, which certainly has its issues. It's another thing when an individual has been on puberty blockers for so long they actually don't have genital material to perform a surgery, and thus they have to craft an orifice, a wound, and then prevent it from closing.
You do really... Oh, my one viewer realizes that essentially means giving the puberty blockers to a trans individual to prepare them to become trans actually makes it worse.
And use stomach lining to create the interior. And I suppose the issue is the sole purpose of that the surgery is to create an organ for which the individual will never experience pleasure because of the puberty blockers, but a different individual, a male, can experience sexual pleasure by, penetrating the wound with his genitals. That's what they're doing. Anyway, let's read. Rep. Ocasio-Cortez's accusation that the tweet contained false information is itself outrightly false in its face. Rep. Ocasio-Cortez knowingly made this allegation in bad faith. And I think that's fair to say because AOC's team had they did the work setting this thing up. It added that AOC recklessly blamed Ms. Raichik and her tweet for the actions of other people reacting to Boston Children's Hospital's video, claiming that it fueled threats and harassment towards the hospital and its staff and incited violence against trans and LGBT people. Heritage argued that the Office of Congressional Ethics should reprimand Ocasio-Cortez, remind lawmakers they have a duty to refrain from making false accusations, strike the accusations from the record, and press AOC to apologize to Raichik. This week, Raichik delivered the complaint directly to Ocasio-Cortez's office and asked a House staffer to stop lying about American citizens. Raichik then ran into Ocasio-Cortez in the Capitol, which is just, brutal, because AOC actually poses for a picture with her. Quote, "I just delivered an ethics complaint to your office because you lied about me in a committee hearing," Raichik said. Quote, "You're actually super transphobic and I never want to share a space with you." AOC's office did not immediately respond to request for comment. AOC is a liar. It's what she does. I'd like to bring it back to January 6th, When AOC told that story that I love to bring up oh so much, where she said someone knocked on her door and she ran and hid in the bathroom and she heard someone go, "Where is she? Where is she?" Which probably never happened, by the way, for those unfamiliar with the story. What happened was, after January 6th, the insurrection, as they call it, many conservatives pointed out the story made no sense because AOC was not in the Capitol building. She was in a different building. And the media defended AOC. And actually, I posted about this. And then I had journalists DMing me being like, "You were wrong. There are tunnels that connect the Capitol to that building. So her being scared makes sense." And so I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, how did I get this one wrong? This doesn't make sense. I'm seeing these videos of all these people standing around outside the office. How is she scared? Sure enough, the story she told and the time frame she gave an exact time. That story happened 1 hour before anyone breached the Capitol building. So either AOC knew in advance the Capitol would be breached, or she was lying. The simple answer is she was lying. But hey, if you want to be a conspiracy theorist and pretend that AOC knew in advance that people would breach the Capitol, I have to wonder how that would be possible. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I think the simple answer is AOC is a liar. She made up a fake story. She's doing the same thing now. But I guess the problem is the people who follow AOC don't care about what's true. They're emotionally satisfied by her being a hate-filled, evil person. Now, to be fair, I will give AOC credit where credit is due. She's opposing the Restrict Act. Fine, fair point. If you do something good, I will give you credit for it. But I still think she's a bad person. And I think the only reason she's opposing the Restrict Act is because she wants to protect TikTok. Not that she actually cares that the Restrict Act is basically Patriot Act 2.0. Worse. It is. Patriot Act on steroids. If you follow someone like AOC, you will be misinformed and, as they say, malinformed. Because AOC takes things that are true and then twists them to confuse you. And so you end up believing something that is false. For instance, what you see often with the left is like, oh, here's an example. In the context of Moody's Analytics, they predicted that Donald Trump would win with a landslide. And so when I say something like that, what do? They clip it out of context. They remove all cultural relevance and cultural context from the statement and then say, look how wrong he was. Well, me citing Moody's Analytics isn't wrong. It's what they said. So I try to be more careful because they try to manipulate. I'll say, based on all of the facts in politics today, I think Donald Trump will win tremendously. However, things will change. Things will change. And who knows what will end up happening. But this is what they do. It is a true statement that I said today, I think Trump will win. But I also recognize that there are many variables that will change over the next 2 years, which could result in a Trump loss. They'll cut out that last part, only show the first part and say, haha, you were wrong. No, I'm not wrong. I'm completely right. Right now, based on the crumbling economy and the polls, it shows Trump would win, period. But who knows what will happen in the next several months.
All right.
Therein lies the point. Anyway, the simple story here is AOC is a liar. I think this is really fantastic to deliver this ethics complaint, so bravo. And I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.
Fast and silent. Nice. Not sure, but let's do it. Understood. Yes. Okay.
I got the first wave of fatties dealt with. Maybe there's more, maybe there isn't. Hopefully there isn't. Oh, and there's nothing left to watch on this end. Let's return to watching Destiny's kick stream. Well, not stream. Not streaming right now.
From the British Empire.
he stands up after the tackle.
Great.
With Commotion, you don't stand up afterwards. You go flaccid
I
immediately.
hope not to
And
find
not
a
only that,
harpy
but
there.
Commotion doesn't happen in a football player,
That's
and it
easy.
rarely happens in adults.
Great.
It usually happens in pre-adolescent
No
males
problem.
from a projectile, like
Okay.
a hockey puck,
Anything
an elbow,
more?
or a baseball. So already we were in weird territory.
That's
But then the fact that he stood up, took a couple steps, and fell down, that doesn't happen with Commotion. So it's something else. And he has no
Waiting
pulse
silently
immediately.
for your
Well,
orders.
what kinds of things do that? Well, only a few
Let's
things do
go.
it. Most
All
of them are
right.
cardiac. And when the cart is
right.
restarted again, people usually kind of come around. Now, they can have a shocked lung, right? So they need to be ventilated. And they can have neurological effects, and they can be a while before they're breathing normally on their own.
Sounds
But in
good.
Damar's case, he arrested again in the ER. That's weird unless he...
Let's go.
Jesus.
Come on. Let's go.
Okay. Maybe I'll try to go out and install my phone. I think I need to like work on this. I wonder if I should just do like a
Come on,
fresh
the
install of Windows on a
infected are
laptop. But I'm
waiting.
always
Oh,
paranoid.
those
because
barrels
there's
do a
some
lot of
radiation.
damage to the chubbies.
Whenever I go to
Sounds
drag
good.
something on this
Of
monitor,
course.
there's like a down arrow and an expanding thing. Is that a Windows 11 feature, or is that like some software with the laptop feature?
All right.
I think it's to
Come
move
on.
it to the other monitor or to maximize the window.
Okay. For the Empire. That's easy. Of course. Perfect. Sounds good. For the humans.
That's Windows 11.
All
The other
right.
Windows reset on USB sticks. You don't get stupid
Of course.
shit.
I love it.
Made a goof.
Not Windows 11.
Let him get
Alright.
too close and would have gotten blown up if I let him hit
For
the bomb.
the Emperor. I love
Oh well, he's not gonna handle this
Yeah,
room.
like, do I need like my Aces?
Great.
I don't even know what the fuck this
I
program
still
is.
have some tricks up my sleeve.
Getting rid of the non-standard
my
shit is
commander.
half the point.
Or I could just
Yeah,
kill
so I
him
feel like I
myself.
should just do.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe just a clean install. Fuck it. Can you do like a clean thing from Windows now if you just like reset? Like, is that pretty good, or do I need to do like the whole USB stick and get a
All right.
all that shit?
Perfect. Wonderful.
Adjust the fans and see
Come
first. No, it shouldn't be the fact that I need to turn the fans up to 12,000 RPM just to like drag browser
This would be
windows around my laptop without fucking
Understood.
lagging. That's insane. There's no way.
Wonderful. Yes.
Clean image will require a new ISO and USB. You really don't think reset your PC is good enough?
This is
Whoa,
going
I didn't know.
fun.
What? When can I zoom out that much? My
Is it
mind
lagging any
just
other
got
way?
wasted.
Well, it's just like it's like even like dragging this window around the laptop is like super laggy. Like this shouldn't
Great.
happen. This CPU is like insane. Everything about this laptop is crazy. Like the desktop experience should be like an iMac. It should be like smooth as fuck with no questions asked. But it's not. Like
Right.
everything dragging around the.
I'm going to
monitor is just
prepare
really, really, really laggy. Like
with
the,
one of. Going to at least bring this.
the browser is like lagging the fuck out of the laptop.
That's slow.
I
Yes.
have a ROG X13.
Do
I
I
left
care?
it something like
Also
it first,
no.
but it was cleared after Windows Update and Armory Crate shit stopped downloading. In the task manager, what's current gigahertz / clock speed?
That's a
Like,
weird
even
sound.
clicking things here is like fucking laggy. It's so stupid. 4.8 gigahertz.
This is nice. All right. On your orders, Commander.
Does it happen when the second monitor is disabled?
I hate rats, don't you?
Is there a play speed option? Nope.
What?
Disabling the second monitor seems to help a lot, actually.
Just gonna start things off with a grenade.
Let's go.
Goodbye.
Perfect. So glad to do it. For the humans! No fear!
Disabling the transparent effects features
For the
makes
Empire!
it work smoothly, keeping the seconds disabling the transparency effects, settings, accessibility. What is that settings accessibility on? Is that on like the
Understood.
armory crate thing, or?
Come on! Great. For the glory of Quintus. Perfect. Great. I hope not to find a harpy there. Come on!
Where is
I should be able to kill them.
Which setting system?
Perfect. Silent.
Oh, those are executive.
Lethal. Fast and silent.
Settings, accessibility.
I have
visual
one grenade
effects.
left.
Come on!
I do want to use it there.
Settings and the search bar. Settings. Display settings. Windows update settings. Maybe display
Okay.
settings.
Let me blow up some heads!
I don't see accessibility anywhere.
I still have some tricks up my sleeve. For the Empire. Let's kill the enemies of the Empire. The party has just begun. For the humans. No fear. For the Empire. For the humans. Those heads are calling
Alright, Windows
for
OS
a
10 did
bullet.
the job to fix this. The real problems began very slow boot, no boot at all, full OS crashing.
For the humans! Come on.
Executive.
Not sure, but let's do it. That's easy. So glad to do it. So glad to do it. For the Empire! Yes!
Oh.
Come on. Excellent idea, sir. Of course. Great. I hope not to find a harpy there. Perfect.
Should be able to blow these guys up.
Of course. All right. Perfect. Okay. Yes. Come on. So glad to do it. All right.
Had a grenade for that.
For the
Used them all.
Come on. Those heads are
I wish I could
calling
show you
for a
guys,
bullet. Understood. Of course.
I don't have like a separate camera with me.
The party has just begun. For the humans.
Like dragging windows around the laptop is like laggy as fuck.
For
like
the
stutter,
Empire.
stutter, 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 stutter. But I don't understand how. I don't know what's stuttering. That's
No
the only issue.
fear.
Right, this is why
still
people
have
buy
some
Macs,
tricks
dude.
up my
I'm feeling it. I'm
sleeve.
starting to feel that fucking Mac.
For the Empire.
I used to learn how to use fucking shit ass fucking iOS.
So glad to do it. Anything more?
Just the appearance and performance of Windows. Yeah, I already turned off the transparency thing, but
Wonderful. All right. No fear.
have you tried changing your top monitor to 60 hertz? Kill yourself. Why the fuck would I change my fucking monitor to 60 hertz? Are you fucking retarded?
Great.
I would trash this and buy a $700 fucking laptop before doing that.
I love it. Let's go.
Another door.
For the Empire.
On.
Perfect.
What camera am I using this channel? It's a built-in webcam. The built-in webcam is pretty decent. Is anything maxing out of the task manager? No, those are like old problems. Right? Random things maxing out of the task manager. It's never that easy to diagnose, especially laptop problems. It's always some weird esoteric shit, like the secondary GPU isn't properly functioning, or there's like some weird like L3 cache issue on the chip that doesn't communicate well with some proprietary UEFI program that's loaded onto the chip the way that, like, it's always some like really weird fucking esoteric shit.
Know what would fix that? Everyone had to produce the same shit because communism.
Your GPU isn't even available. What does that mean? I don't see my GPU in the task manager. Do you think that might be it? Oh no, wait. If I go to performance, I see GPU. GPU 0 and GPU 1, and they're both like working.
One, 4 items plus the.
Good quality. It's worth taking it. Wonderful.
Install? Yeah, maybe. Someone wrote a guide on resetting the Zephyrus Duo. 2 years old. Holy shit.
This is going to be fun.
I love it. Great.
Wait, nope, found it. Lucky.
That's easy.
Alright, let's get out of here.
Is there really a Linux distro called Fedora? Interesting. And it's one of the best. Wow. Discover wanted to help you return this laptop. I don't fucking know. We'll see.
Commander? Yes? Fast and silent.
Fuck it. I'll try reset. We'll see how it looks after that. Best Buy is a 50-day. Oh, I missed on this. Okay. Well, we might go out to eat. Maybe I'll stream on my phone. Otherwise, I'll be at Tim Pool tonight. Stay safe. Be careful. I think Tim Pool is live, right? It starts at 7 or 8 or something. In his studio? Yeah, it should be. I mean,
New
it's
news
right in his house.
nation.
What time zone?
Oh look, the story of this game is that people who are afraid of excessive population excuse me, in their efforts to find a quick fix, fuck things up. So many research. Alright. Yeah, this isn't useful. Anyways, I mentioned that. Just as good as that one. Oh, effect radius. Now that would be useful. I'm going to get this. Hard choice. Attack range, Q range. And sacrifice the speed up. That is indeed enough to kill a executive in dot. A hard choice. Let's see what second thought has been posted. I'm new to this guy's channel. Let's see how it, like, he's clearly a communist or socialist, but he's also very prone to posting propaganda or saying propagandistic things. But let's go ahead. East Palestine. Well, first off, we need to fix up the train lines, the tracks. We need to upgrade those. But let's see if he hits that top point.
It's a night like any other night. My wife and I were sitting here playing Call of Duty. We heard like a lot of sirens and a lot of craziness going on. So we got up and we're like, let's go see, you know, the whole sky was glowing.
A train derailed in Ohio.
A train derailment in a small Ohio town.
The town is under a state of emergency after 50 train cars derailed, causing a massive fire a half-mile long.
38 cars derailed?
You know what? Let's research Callius. Oh, tab. Yep, here's the speed shot bit trick. Let's see what it says.
Hello YouTube. Welcome to a video. So today, Kalis. They are billions. So a fun thing about Kalis is that his attack speed is very, very slow normally. However, I found a trick. If you target an enemy and immediately target an enemy once he shoots, he fires much faster. And yeah, I found that it is ferociously effective. Gotta have good timing, but the speed at which I'm timing it isn't even perfect. A couple times I've gotten it, but definitely not.
Alright. I'm going to get this health up. Then I want the splash damage in the rank. Now for these upgrades. Obviously getting that. 400 expert workshops. 170. $120. Not enough. Cereal farming. Needs hunting weapons when I can unlock this for just 20 extra. Alright, let's see if we can deal with it. I have no idea what I'm in for. Let's go. Oh, this is full-blown tower defense style. want to get a lot of failures, but I just... Let's go ahead and go for it and see how this works. Oh, I might want to do this. Okay, much more useful.
Reporting for duty. 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 Reporting for duty.
I think I'll just build another barrier.
Commander?
And I can move my units freely,
Waiting on
thank
orders.
goodness.
Great idea, sir. Any orders? Do you need me? Commander? Tell me. Orders, sir.
Our defenses are being attacked.
All the way. Just guide me to the infected. For the colony! Ready and waiting. Any orders? Sorry, sir. I was cleaning my weapon. Perfect.
Oh, this isn't
All the way.
right.
Damn it! Oh! Arr! Oh! Ah!
How am I even going to do that? So this is easy one is after Crossroad. Alright. I think it's designed that I should do the Crossroad. Alright.
And a fire
back to
ensued
this.
which damaged an additional 12 cars.
Officials are ordering everyone within that 1 mile radius to leave your home immediately.
We made it a block and you could just see the flames. I mean, they were a couple hundred feet in the air.
Like the doors of hell were open.
If the temperature continued to rise, it could lead to a catastrophic
explosion. It was decided to blow holes in all 5 cars with explosives and burn off the material.
There were hazardous materials on board this train.
They were carrying well over 115,000 gallons of vinyl chloride.
Vinyl chloride.
The vinyl chloride.
Norfolk Southern Railroad crews initiated a controlled release to the 5 rail cars with the toxic chemicals.
That in turn produced a huge plume of smoke, and with it, serious health and environmental concerns.
Breathing issues, tightness in our chest, severe headaches.
Contaminated drinking water.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed.
It's terrible to look at. You shouldn't walk through a creek and see piles of dead things floating past you. Everything in the creek is dead.
There is no way we are safe being here.
This is worse than what everybody thought it was.
It is decimating our businesses.
Governor DeWine puts all the blame on the rail company and says they should be paying for everything.
Tensions flared tonight at a town hall between residents and government officials.
Norfolk Southern planned to be there, but backed out at the last minute because of what they called a growing physical threat to its employees.
What do you need right now from the government and from Norfolk Southern that you're not getting?
We just want answers. You know, how can you come into a little town like this, make a big oopsie, and just go about your day?
This line is on its way to one of our many destinations across the globe.
We are headed out from our hotel. We're driving out to East Palestine. It's about a 40-minute drive. Found a guy named Luke who is willing to sit down with us for an interview and give us kind of a perspective of the locals in the town about what's going on, how people are feeling. So super excited for that. We're going to go see what this is all about.
On February 3rd, 2023, at 8:55 p.m., a Norfolk Southern train carrying high-hazard flammable chemicals derailed in the town of East Palestine, Ohio. About 50 cars came off the tracks, with several catching fire, prompting first responders to trigger a sudden evacuation of the town.
I said it was like a movie. People were coming and going because you didn't know what would happen. You had cops coming to the doors telling you gotta go. Town was being evacuated. My name is Luke Glavin. We are in East Palestine, Ohio, about half mile from the derailment. People didn't want to go because they didn't think that it was that serious. But everybody was in a state of, panic. My wife and I didn't know what to grab because you didn't know if your house was gonna be blown up or burnt down or if we weren't gonna be able to come back because of some other reason. We didn't know.
I'm gonna get 200.
In the immediate aftermath of the crash, the release of chemicals into the environment, most notably vinyl chloride, a known carcinogen and more generally a toxic chemical, is believed to have caused severe damage to the local environment. Reports and videos from people in the area showed nearby animals sick or dying, with an estimated 43,000 fish and other aquatic animals dying as a result of the derailment. In the most publicized instance, this pet fox died in its owner's arms just days after the crash. But the flames didn't die out on their own. 3 days after the derailment, on February 6th, Norfolk Southern started what's called a controlled burn in order to prevent a possible explosion of some of the remaining train cars. Then, a couple days later, on the 8th, the evacuation order was lifted, and people went back home with some less than reassuring messages from the state government.
Governor, if you were to live in the area, would you feel comfortable moving back into your home?
Look, I think that I would be drinking the bottled water, and I would be continuing to find out what the tests were showing as far as the air. I would be alert and concerned, but I think I would probably be back in my house.
After the accident, I wish that it just would have been dealt with way quicker. The ball would have been rolling quicker than just having Governor DeWine come in here, say it was okay, and the railroad was going to take care of it. I wish the federal government would have got involved, and that would have gave them, the tracks wouldn't have been in as quick as they were. They laid down the tracks. There was trucks here with train tracks on it the day before the controlled burn. So they were ready to go and get that. That was their main goal. And that was imminent by after the evacuation was lifted. It wasn't even 2 minutes after it was lifted. There was trains blowing their whistles to come through town.
But when they came back, many people reported symptoms like nausea, headaches, rashes, and lightheadedness, and understandably remained concerned about the safety of the area.
So guys, look, this is that film. Just so everybody can see here, I'm gonna step on it. It's already in the soil, so you gotta get it like kinda, look, we're not making this shit up, man.
I've heard it's like giving people headaches.
Oh yeah, tingling lips, that was my big thing. Tingling lips, burning eyes, really bad.
Luke told us about a creek just down the street from where he lives, and we decided to check it out for ourselves.
All right, more houses.
Look at that, how it's bubbling up like that. This film, it just sits on top of the water like dish detergent or something, and the smell is it's a really particular chemically smell.
All right, can we get to the informational portion instead of the fear-mongering portion?
The testing that's being done, the air testing, is just...
These amounts are nothing. When your family's seen of that, is that
reimbursement for food started?
Announced they'd be donating $25,000 to East Palestine families and establishing a $1 million fund, which for the town's 5,000 residents works out to just $5 and $212 respectively. These amounts are nothing. They're worse than nothing. They're an insult to the people they just poisoned. Hey, we know you need to move out of your home, maybe forever. Here's a couple $100 to start over somewhere else. The future of the entire community and all its residents is uncertain, and a few coins tossed by the perpetrators on their way out of town doesn't solve anything.
What would it cost to get the...
What's really weighing on my mind
that takes
today
no
is just
stone
whatsoever.
I can get it pretty
and
early.
Our house value, you know, if I want to sell this down the road and try and make this a rental property, how do I even bring people in here? You know, I tried meeting up with a guy on Marketplace and he wouldn't even come close to town. Everybody sees this as a chemical disaster, a wasteland. I just want everybody to do what they're going to say they're going to do, and I just pray that everything going forward goes smoothly and that our community can once get back to what it used to be, a tight-knit, everybody knows everybody, fun-loving town.
To understand how the East Palestine derailment happened, we need to go back about a decade. Between 2012 and 2014, North America was hit with a string of devastating train derailments. In 2012, a train derailed in Paulsboro, New Jersey, and it released 23,000 gallons of toxic vinyl chloride gas into the air.
Well,
in 2013, a train carrying crude oil derailed near Castleton in North Dakota, and around a dozen cars erupted in flames. And the next year, in Lynchburg, Virginia, another train derailed, this time causing 50,000 gallons of oil to ignite and spill into the James River. But by all accounts, the most destructive and infamously memorable derailment of the time has to be the Lock-Megantic disaster. In July 2013, a 73-car freight train carrying crude oil derailed in the town of Lac-Mégantic in Quebec, Canada. The train exploded, killing 47 people and destroying more than 40 buildings in the Lac-Mégantic downtown area. Catastrophic derailments like this, which accompanied the more generalized, record-level oil train spills at the time, created concern. After all, between 2008 and 2014, the amount of crude oil being transported by train went from around 9,500 carloads to a massive 500,000. It wasn't all that surprising that these numbers were on the rise, and it didn't take long after Lac-Mégantic for these now pervasive crude oil loads traveling across the country to be labeled bomb trains by activists and the press. Train safety was on people's minds in a sudden, major way, but for some people, it already had been for a while. Railroad unions had been advocating for better rail safety for years before these crashes. Crashes that destroyed ecosystems and flattened towns. Specifically, unions were sounding the alarm on a trend that today goes by the name precision scheduled railroading. You might have heard about PSR these past few weeks. Precision scheduled railroading is a generic term that encompasses a few different business practices, all of which are centered around the same goal: cutting costs and reducing the operating ratios for rail companies. Some of these practices are fairly benign and common sense, but that's not true for everything under the PSR umbrella. With PSR, the aim is to get below a roughly 60% operating ratio, which in practical terms means that companies are shooting for only 60 cents of each dollar they make going towards actually running the railroads, with the remaining 40% going towards executive pay and dividends to investors. Investors who, in the last few decades, have increasingly been large Wall Street financial groups. Today, 6 of the 7 Class 1 railroad companies, the companies with the highest revenues that together make up 94% of the freight rail industry's earnings, use PSR cost-cutting strategies explicitly. And it's arguably the change that's made the profit margins of the top 5 US railroads double these past 15 years. Just to give you an idea of how much money we're talking about here, in the first 6 months of 2022, a handful of rail companies were so flush with cash, they put $10 billion in stock buybacks. And it's not just thanks to PSR. Railroads are a natural monopoly. It doesn't make much sense to compete over the same routes, the same rails, the same land, and the insane cost of getting a rail company started when profits are possibly years or decades down the line. And as a good reflection of that, the industry is currently a tight-knit oligopoly. Around the 90s, mostly led by this guy, rail companies figured out how to take advantage of that, and found that the best way to make profits and increase their investors' returns was to stop acting in the best interest of the public, and to some extent even their clients, by making the rail networks less and less safe, with fewer investments and upgrades, catering more heavily to larger businesses at the expense of smaller companies, and gutting their workforce. The idea being that lower costs could mean a bigger cut of the profits. But what does that mean in practice? 1. Longer trains. Longer trains are the norm for freight companies today.
Freight railroads are now running consistently longer trains, upwards of 10,000 to 15,000 feet. That equates to 2 or 3 mile long trains, or to put it another way, 33 football fields.
These longer trains are harder to stop. If an accident happens, it can quickly escalate with more cars getting involved by default. Their heavier weight can cause more damage to the rails more quickly, and they're harder to inspect thoroughly. The reason they're harder to inspect for safety is because PSR also implies 2. Fewer, more overworked rail workers. Since 2015, 30% of the freight rail workforce has been laid off. 45,000 workers. This follows a general trend in the rail industry of companies cutting costs by getting rid of more and more workers.
The railroad workers who remain have been forced to do more with less. They are faced with discipline or dismissal if they refuse to comply, and the consequences of these choices are no longer hypothetical. Carriers are also compensating for reduced staffing by requiring remaining employees to perform work outside of their craft, in addition to fulfilling their regular duties. At best, this may involve employees performing tasks with which they are not experienced. At worst, employees may be forced to do work for which they are not qualified. Furthermore, rather than maintaining appropriate staffing levels, carriers are mandating overtime for workers who are already stretched thin and penalizing workers who refuse to come to work when they are sick. In an industry where fatigue is a constant risk factor, exposing employees to additional fatigue by asking them to work longer, faster, or perform multiple jobs, especially while sick, is a recipe for disaster. The FRA's own safety data shows that since 2009, the number of railroad accidents and incidents reported to the FRA has not meaningfully declined. Derailments, fatalities, and collisions all increased in the years leading up to the pandemic. Given the notorious pressure that railroads put on their workers to prevent them from reporting incidents to the FRA, we suspect that these accidents and incidents are severely undercounted, especially during the pandemic when safety risks have been much higher and normal government functions, including safety inspections, were curtailed. The bottom line is that PSR prioritizes short-term profits over the long-term health and safety of our freight rail system. Between reports from frontline employees at the FRA's own data and the FRA's own data, it is clear that PSR puts rail workers and the public at a real and unacceptable safety risk.
And finally, the last big part of the PSR strategy is 3. Avoiding safety upgrades to train tech and lobbying to make sure they never get imposed. If we go back to all those derailments in the early 2010s, they got the public's attention and motivated regulators in the US to set their sights on rail companies. In response to derailments like Lac-Megantic in 2014, the Obama administration did improve safety procedures, but just barely. An original rule intended to fit dangerous trains with a better braking system, ECP brakes, as opposed to air brake technology dating back to the Civil War, was completely gutted by industry lobbying before it was passed. Despite the safety concerns of regular people in the path of increasingly dangerous trains, lobbyists for the chemical, oil, and rail industries all came together to make sure that these improved braking systems, which the rail industry had actually been boasting about for years, would only be applied to a few trains. To do that, these companies lobbied to make sure that trains running several dangerous carloads wouldn't be required to have better brakes so long as there were fewer than 20 dangerous cars in a row, or 35 in total over the length of the train. What's more, chemical lobbyists specifically proposed a new, restrictive definition of what a high-hazard flammable train is, to make sure that trains like the Norfolk Southern one in Ohio carrying vinyl chloride would not have to be equipped with this safer braking system. Many known dangerous substances wouldn't fall under the chemical lobby's definition of dangerous, and that way, they could travel on leaner, cheaper, but empirically more unsafe trains. In other words, for these companies, accidents are not something to be avoided, but are rather just another variable in their business model. Safety is a cost that needs to be minimized, not a priority, and certainly not a factor that can take precedence over profit. To be clear, safety and profit don't always conflict with one another. The thing is that when they do, companies aren't out there lobbying for more safety. Someone was always, inevitably, predictably going to be hurt. And at least right now, it looks like that meant East Palestine.
So disasters like this, I've been saying since day one, it's an industrial disaster. Those can be prevented. They can be prevented not like a tire blowing on a car prevented. They can be prevented because they should have strict maintenance schedules. They should have strict, that car wasn't a hazardous chemical car or train. How was that not a hazardous chemical train?
And this resistance to safety regulation is incredibly strong, despite freight rail being one of the most profitable industries in the US, raking in over $146 billion since 2015. Just to put the price of safety in perspective, the railroad industry itself estimated that it would only cost $3 billion to implement better braking systems. Not a huge expense, but compared to lobbying and just not doing the upgrades, corporations are always going to take the cheaper option. After first gutting the Obama regulations, when Trump and the Republicans gained control of the government, rail companies leveraged their funding once again, this time to the tune of $6 million in GOP campaign financing. With the new administration in their pocket, like with the previous government, rail companies successfully made sure that Trump's administration would repeal the Obama-era rules on the basis of a miscalculated cost-benefit analysis. To quickly recap, the initial, relatively weak regulation of the Obama era was repealed under the next administration. Despite Democrats and Republicans desperately pointing fingers at each other for East Palestine, they are both culpable. And today, the Biden administration is acting like it can't do anything to prevent future accidents. On February 14th, 11 days after the derailment in East Palestine, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg tweeted this: "We're constrained by law on some areas of rail regulation, like the braking rule withdrawn by the Trump administration in 2018 because of a law passed by Congress in 2015. But we are using the powers we do have to keep people safe." This tweet is, plainly speaking, a lie. Pete's department has the ability to redo the cost-benefit analysis correctly, which would bring back the Obama-era rule. It can expand the definition of hazardous materials to include known carcinogens like vinyl chloride, and make sure those trains are treated with increased attention. And it can even impose ECP brakes on certain trains, according to this article in The Lever. But the Biden admin has no more interest in pursuing safety than previous administrations. Before the East Palestine train derailment, the Buttigieg Transportation Department was even considering an industry-backed rule relaxing brake testing requirements. That is, making trains even less safe. Unsurprisingly, once again, 5 major rail unions have stood in common-sense opposition to this attempt to make railways even less safe. The sad reality is that over the past decade, the story has remained remarkably consistent. Unions warn about the degradation of safety on the tracks. Rail companies use the piles of money they made by caring less about safety to influence policy and make sure that safety is even further reduced.
I mean, if you really think about it, they're spending money to reduce safety regulations. They just implement the safety solutions. They wouldn't have to waste that money on reducing regulation.
And as a result, we suffer preventable, catastrophic accidents. Doing research for this video, I cannot stress how tiring and frustrating it was to come across dozens of articles, press releases, hearings, presentations at conventions, and testimonials from years ago where people keep saying the same things over and over again. Safety isn't being prioritized. A devastating accident is all but certain. We need regulation and investment in security to protect people from disasters. When profit is the only thing that matters, safety is an unnecessary luxury. It was only a matter of time before something like East Palestine happened, and everyone was just waiting around to see where it was going to hit.
I'm wasting money opportunity.
And the cherry on top of this blatant disregard for safety is that rail companies are trying to make it seem like their lobbying is actually pro-safety and even pro-environment. For example, in their comments on the proposed Obama 2014 regulation that would have required higher brake safety standards, rail companies keep referencing how if these regulations are implemented, the cost of rail would go up, and therefore businesses would prioritize truck freight, which is worse for the environment. But rail companies are not only pushing all their smaller clients off onto trucks by reducing their workforce. Just one look at the importance of fossil fuel transportation for rail companies' bottom lines and the carelessness with which they lobby against regulations that make accidents like East Palestine, with its plumes of smoke and rivers filled with dead fish less likely, reveal how insincere their concern for the environment actually is. And okay, by the time this video releases, we'll certainly know more about the crash and its causes. The point of the past couple minutes hasn't been to nail down the details of which specific regulations and business practices had an impact on this one derailment, but to point out something relevant to just about every derailment in this country. Sadly, they happen all the time. East Palestine is a tragic example of one of the more catastrophic ones, but an even more devastating event could happen any day now, and plenty of less harmful derailments happen every day. The US sees an average of over 1,000 train derailments a year. The purpose of going behind the scenes for a bit is to point out a pattern, not a specific, relevant regulatory failure. A pattern in which unions, the public, and usually smaller, disenfranchised communities consistently have their concerns for safety and environmental protection run over by companies looking for the largest possible margins, and those companies getting the green light from government institutions they've captured. 25 million people in this country live within a 1-mile radius of a crude-by-rail route. Dangerous trains are all around us, and not by our decision. The least we are owed is control over their safety. Seriously, what do we all gain from these companies neglecting safety for the sake of executive profits? Something that came up in our interview and just chatting with people around town was how abandoned they all felt by the media narrative around this incident.
This was the second largest chemical disaster in United States history, and it's not being televised or anything like that. And I feel that we should be getting way more attention to this.
And that's not just a feeling. He's absolutely right that this derailment wasn't being talked about very much. On February 5th, 2 days after the derailment, Pete Buttigieg was on 3 Sunday news shows: CNN's State of the Union, NBC's Meet the Press, and ABC's This Week. Pete wasn't asked about East Palestine, nor did he feel the need to bring it up on any of these shows, with the broadcast focusing almost exclusively on the whole Chinese weather balloon thing. But it's not just Pete. This was a trend. A Media Matters study of the first 10 days of reporting on major cable networks, CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, and broadcasters, ABC, CBS, and NBC, found that East Palestine only received 3 hours of coverage in total for those 10 days. And from February 10th to 12th, it got no coverage whatsoever. And to make matters worse, in those few hours when East Palestine was on America's TVs, the Media Matters study found that the responsibility of rail companies in lobbying away safety regulations and deteriorating safety on the tracks wasn't addressed. To quote the study directly, with little exception, this story has been covered on corporate TV news as an accident, with outlets showing little curiosity about the circumstances that make these types of incidents not just more likely, but perhaps inevitable. In all fairness, reporting has picked up since those first 10 days, but the framing largely hasn't changed. East Palestine is still being covered mostly as a natural disaster. That's negligent.
Okay.
The press is supposed to hold power accountable.
I don't think that's
but
actually
media institutions and
way.
rail companies being owned by the same interest complicates that task. And to add another problem to the pile, in a shocking twist no one could have seen coming, this lack of coverage was seized upon by the far right to try to convey the same white supremacist narrative Trump seized on in 2016, that white conservatives are being ignored because they're white conservatives. Despite Fox being equally culpable of neglecting East Palestine in the days following the derailment, Jesse Waters, Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Greg Gutfeld, Benny Johnson, Sean Duffy, Lisa Booth, and Brian Kilmeade all made claims blaming wokeism in some way or another for the lack of coverage, and citing the fact that because the residents of East Palestine are largely white and conservative, they got less attention in the press. To be clear, this is a baseless accusation, and implies that disasters in Democrat-leaning communities of color are covered better, which just isn't true. To quote Media Matters again, coverage of public health and environmental crises affecting communities of color is frequently poor in both quantity and quality. But in any case, the primary purpose of this kind of rhetoric isn't to demand justice for the people of
this guy. At least of this one video. Oh, I'm quite open with me being a conservative, so this is happening. Even though I am favorable to communism, the way he just pits left and right together is absolutely unconscionable. Like, what he's complaining about is a belief of mainstream right-leaning people, whereas a lot of right-leaning people are really hating on the fringe elements. And while the left argues that we shouldn't be hard on the fringe elements, I think that's the groups we need to be hardest on.
This episode
and this video is exactly about that, so no. This one might be more interesting to me.
This episode is made possible by Ren.
I will never understand people.
They're the worst.
Oftentimes, when you talk about socialism with someone, you get to this point in the conversation. Socialism sounds good in theory, but it could never work in real life. People are too competitive, too greedy, too selfish, too cruel, too violent. To insert something bad. They're the worst. Or sometimes, the conversation doesn't focus on how evil people are, but on how commerce-driven humans are. Socialism would never work because humans are economic animals with brains built for trade and maximizing our returns on investment. Much of the public debate about socialism doesn't really focus on the merits of socialism. Instead of debating whether it would be better if everyone was housed, fed, free from exploitation, and working shorter days, because it's immediately obvious that it would be, or how we might get there and the institutions that would coordinate these needs, the conversation gets cut short on the grounds that it's unrealistic. Despite socialists proving the possibility of these things empirically, through experimentation, logic, and historical or cross-cultural parallel, all these efforts are struck down by these really simple statements that just kind of sound true. Sure, capitalism sucks, but that's because humans suck, so why should we believe socialism could be any better? Socialism is pie in the sky. It's hubris from young people who don't know how the world works yet. Just wait till you hit your 30s and you'll grow out of it. And I understand why this works. It's a convincing idea. Everyone has people in their life who are greedy, selfish jerks, and everyone can recognize the part of themselves that is a greedy, selfish jerk. It stands to reason that human nature has, at the very least, an element of selfishness and cruelty to it. But this has very little to do with socialism, and as a justification for capitalism, it's a very strange one. Gotcha. In this video, I'm not going to prove what human nature is or isn't. If you'd like to watch a video approaching this question from a biological perspective, go check out my buddy Ugottmik's video from a couple months ago, where he breaks down the nature versus nurture debate using twin studies and emerging science on epigenetics. Don't like that? Check out Andrewism's video about how different philosophical traditions have interpreted the human nature argument across time and space, and the kinds of society that flourished with different understandings of humanity. Two great videos, two very different approaches, two pretty similar conclusions. Human nature is not a very good argument. In this video, I'm going to take a third approach to this conclusion. We're going to be looking at how this idea of a singular, corrupt, logical, and self-interested human nature gains traction as a defense of capitalism, the inherent contradictions of this idea, and why it doesn't actually undermine socialist politics. And I know I'm fighting a stupid battle here. The human nature argument is one that takes like 3 seconds to make, and that anti-socialists never feel like they have to justify. Except maybe by pointing to someone doing something bad and calling it proof, or relying on the assumption that if a past socialist experiment failed, it was because of human nature. Debunking this is going to take me many minutes, because I'm not going to take those easy shortcuts, and maybe that makes what I'm doing even dumber. Anyway, the first thing to address with a lot of these human nature claims is how weirdly essentializing they are. For some reason, when human nature is invoked, it's always the part of human nature that sucks that we focus on, despite the fact that we have millions of examples of people being selfless. People regularly make massive personal sacrifices before their brain even has the time to compute what kind of selfish benefit they might gain from it. There are plenty of documented cases of people jumping into a river to save a drowning stranger at the drop of a hat, and probably even more undocumented cases of the same thing. Hundreds of millions of hours are volunteered every year. Mutual aid networks exist throughout the world. And on a daily basis, you almost certainly do something kind for someone else. Tiny little selfless acts like opening a door for someone are almost invisible in our everyday life because they're so immediate and common. I'll admit these aren't the strongest arguments I've ever made on this channel, but the reason I'm not spending too much time on them is because, one, as I'll flesh out later in the video, socialism doesn't require selflessness by any means. A socialist world could work even if it was filled with people who are fundamentally, ontologically greedy. And two, before we even get to that, I have to point out that there's no reason to think people are more fundamentally greedy than they are generous. And even if we are more fundamentally greedy, the simple fact that selfishness and greed exist is not a justification for building an economic system that rewards that behavior. If you believe that humans are naturally selfish, rather than believing that it's something we're capable of and that we're equally capable of kindness, and most of the time we just flip-flop between the two, that's fine. I probably won't be able to convince you otherwise, but I won't spend too much time on that because no matter what you believe human nature is, it doesn't logically follow that selfishness and greed should be the ticket to wealth and power in our society. If you think we're all rotten to our core, you're going to need another piece of evidence or some other argument to prove to me that that means our society should reward those who take this to the extreme, that the most openly selfish and greedy of us deserve to be on top. My guess is those arguments aren't going to be very convincing. I don't know many people that believe society would be best served when selfish people are in charge and have more power to be selfish. But not all arguments about human nature as a justification for capitalism take this form. Instead of arguing for capitalism from the point of greed and selfishness, both of which have a negative connotation, some people claim that we are built for the profit-seeking trade that capitalism depends on, and that capitalism actually evolved out of this aspect of human nature. In The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, one of the first and most influential defenders of capitalism, wrote that there is, quote, a certain propensity in human nature. The propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another. Unlike animals, Smith says that humans are simply designed to exchange and compare and seek out the best deal. As a counterexample, Smith says, quote, nobody ever saw a dog make a fair and deliberate exchange of one bone for another with another dog. But we people, we're human because we are driven towards profit by trade, and therefore capitalism is just the inevitable social system that results from individual behaviors. The problem is that Smith just made this up. He made it up. He's not wrong that humans trade and that for the most part, animals don't. But all Smith did was see that people around him were trading goods for other goods or for currency. He saw that other animals weren't doing it, and so he essentialized it as part of human nature basically on a whim. He assumed that this must be something humans are hardwired to do, and that we must have always done. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith imagines, which is to say he guesses, that the history of humanity is one where we start trading small goods with one another. I'll give you this thing for that thing. Then we figure out that this is inefficient as we specialize in our labor, and therefore we start creating currencies. First we use salt and leather to trade goods, and eventually we figure out precious metals work best because they travel well and you can standardize them. And eventually, quite naturally, you get a market system based on maximizing the amount of precious metals you have. This then becomes more complex and larger until you develop systems of debt and accounting. And soon enough, you have capitalism. If you've ever taken an Econ 101 class, there's a good chance you've heard this story before. Capitalism, for Smith, happens very naturally, and it all starts from the fact that this is just how humans work and interact with one another. It's a really effective justification for capitalism, because if maximizing profit through trade is just what humans do, and it transcends time and space, then every outcome of trade is justified. Why would we ever question it or get in its way? Morality is always changing, it's different from person to person, and nobody can agree on it. But profit-seeking is immortal, and it's part of us, so it becomes untouchable. But like I said, this was just Adam Smith's best guess. When you go looking through history and throughout the world, as David Graeber does in Debt the First 5,000 Years, this story of truck and barter becoming currency, becoming capitalism, just doesn't exist anywhere. The ethnologist Caroline Humphrey puts it really bluntly. No example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described, let alone the emergence from it of money. All available ethnography suggests that there has never been such a thing. Most of human existence until very recently was spent just giving other people stuff. Different societies in different parts of the world did things differently. Some would have central collection points where resources would be gathered and then redistributed. In other places, people privileged gift giving as a means of exchange. And almost everywhere, people just gave each other things and services either for nothing in return or the vague idea that the other person owed them one. Adam Smith's idea that people were out there figuring out how many bones were worth one really good stick and this eventually turning into capitalism is just not something we've ever been able to find historical proof of. What we do have plenty of proof of is that for most of human existence, we ran our economies on gifts and the common ownership of resources. Barter existed, but at most it was a very small part of human life, and one that you were pretty unlikely to ever encounter at any point in human history. The historical record doesn't seem to show that it's in our human nature to truck and barter, at least a lot less than it indicates that it's in our nature to work together and make collective decisions. And look, I'm not saying that we should limit our imagination for what society should look like based on what we think human nature is, or what we're able to find in pre-existing social models. I'm just saying that if your justification for capitalism is that it's more respectful of our propensity to barter, the historical record shows we are way more capable of doing things differently. Even if someday we find out that Adam Smith had a lucky guess and we did indeed spend most of history getting really good at trading stuff, that wouldn't make capitalism more justifiable because capitalism isn't just about trade. Capitalism is an economic system where a few people own all the tools we need to make stuff. The factories, the farms, the machinery. In other words, the means of production. and use this privileged ownership to employ the vast majority of people to work and transform it into something productive. Trade is a small part of the equation, but Adam Smith makes it seem like it's at the core of capitalism, and that it comes from who we are as humans. The reality is that capitalism is an economic system that has only properly existed for 500 years tops.
More pleasant.
The first people of our species, Homo sapiens, have been kicking it on Earth for several 100,000 years. Neoclassical economists like Smith would have you believe that we stumbled on capitalism, discovered it, as if it were a fact of human life that was out there untouched, but informing the development of our species. These economists, the first capitalist theorists, set out to do for economics what physicists had achieved around the same time, discover a natural property of the world. But this project is impossible, because we made capitalism up. It's the product of a specific historical context. On the one hand, you had the growing power of a merchant class butting up against the dying power of a monarchical class. Feudalism was toppled over the course of a few revolutions and then exported around the world in a series of bloody conquests. And it happened not because we are built for capitalism, but because the feudal system just happened to set the stage for capitalism. Laws introduced the idea of private property, and technologies facilitating trade and production allowed people not born into nobility to acquire wealth. That's why we have capitalism today. Not because it's in our human nature, but because in a specific context it was the most efficient way to accumulate and then hold on to power. The idea that it was part of our human nature only came after. Our present hegemonic view of humans, as either a bloody, greedy, violent animal ready to descend into barbarity at the drop of a hat, or a rational, calculating, self-interested trader, came to dominate at precisely the same time as it became useful for giving legitimacy to the new political order. When capitalism emerged, it came with the myth that we are somehow incredibly rational in the context of a market, owing to our supposed predisposition to trade, but incredibly irrational.
Alright. See what this looks like. I think I'm gonna stop my stream at 6.
Rational and prone to violence in all other social matters. The natural solutions seem to fit with the existing society. An economy organized by a market, coupled with a powerful state to keep the order, and the capitalist class at the head of the factory to keep us in line. So it stuck. It was endlessly reproduced as an incontrovertible truth. And, like the divine right of kings, became the myth that holds the justification for capitalism together. But it doesn't take much to see how contradictory this view of humanity is. It assumes that we are perfectly rational in economic affairs, geniuses at the grocery store able to make complex decisions and assess value on goods to find the perfect equilibrium between cost and return, but irrational idiots the second we have to make decisions about anything else, especially in the halls of government or academia. This is a useful contradiction for capitalist economists, because as soon as people act irrationally, meaning not like what their theories predict, economists can blame it on the fact that people are dumb when they aren't acting like the self-interest economic animal they expect humans to be, and their economic theories stay perfectly intact. Human nature is a safety valve for capitalist economics, a heuristic that can be used to model a society that just happens to benefit capitalists and simultaneously can find a justification when the model fails to explain reality. And at this point in the video, I want to bring us back to socialism. A lot of the misconception about the impact of human nature on socialism comes from the fact that socialism is often poorly defined. Socialism, when we talk about human nature, is often viewed as a society where everything is the same as it is right now, except that people share. That is not what socialism is. And it's easy to see how one greedy, selfish, or cruel person could completely ruin it if socialism depended on people being nice and the honor system. But in reality, socialism, at the economic level, isn't about sharing. It's a society where if everybody needs something, it's owned collectively, and we all get to decide how it's distributed. The means of production are held in common and subject to democratic control. Instead of individual business owners making decisions about production to serve their self-interest and submitting them to the market for review, and so be it if some people get none and others get almost everything, under socialism, the things that affect all of us are decided by all of us. This can take many forms. For example, banks could fund business projects on the basis of a democratic mandate, instead of venture capitalists and for-profit banks calling the shots. Businesses could be run by the people who work there, and who either elect their boss or make strategic decisions by vote, instead of your boss just being some random guy with money. Your town could hold meetings where people point out what's missing and devise ways to fill the gaps, instead of waiting around and hoping someone will find a way to solve the problem in a profitable way. Trade wouldn't disappear, but profit would. You can be as selfish as you want in this context, but good luck convincing everyone else to prioritize your needs at the expense of everyone else's. Without the power to withhold something from someone else because you're the sole owner, what you'll find is that these systems reward those who collaborate. This doesn't mean every little thing has to be approved by everyone else, or that you have to be nice. Everyone is free to be independent so long as that doesn't require taking independence from someone else in the process. All socialism means is that for decisions of societal importance, it's only right that a democratic process applies. Today, we live under a system that rewards those who screw others over. That's a legitimate winning strategy to get ahead under capitalism. In a socialist economy, the only difference is the winning strategy, not the people. None of this implies a perfect society where no one is ever upset, just a society where greed doesn't let a few lucky people take advantage of everyone else. At the end of the day, we'll always squabble about what human nature really looks like. But holding ourselves back by imagining we can't transcend our weaknesses isn't going to get us very far. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this episode is made possible by Ren. We talk a lot about the failures of capitalism on this channel. One of the more obvious ones is our complete unwillingness to transition away from fossil fuel use, which has led us to...
Don't care about fossil fuel issues. Moving on. Let's see if he has anything
This episode
fun
and
to
others
say
like
here.
it are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join our patrons-only Discord, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. Every week on this channel, I focus on critiquing a different aspect of capitalist society, and every week I get comments telling me that I'm not doing my job, because it turns out that what I'm critiquing isn't actually capitalism. No, none of this is capitalism, stupid YouTube man. It's corporatism, or better yet, it's crony capitalism, or actually it's the very trendy techno-feudalism. Real capitalism is basically perfect, so if anything is wrong, it's probably because of something else with a different name. In this video, I'm going to be debunking that idea as thoroughly as I possibly can, because I'm pretty tired of getting these misguided comments.
Is trying
it's not
to
corporatism,
debunk it.
it's not crony capitalism, it's just plain old capitalism. Let's start with the definition for crony capitalism, because although these comments tend to use the word corporatism, unless the US recently began running its economy on a model of tripartite negotiations or instituted a guild-based system of differentiated welfare and privileges, corporatism is the wrong word. So crony capitalism it is. Wikipedia says, crony capitalism, sometimes called cronyism, is an economic system in which businesses thrive not as a result of free enterprise, but rather as a return on money amassed through collusion between a business class and the political class. This is often achieved by the manipulation of relationships with state power by business interests rather than unfettered competition. Then it lists out a couple ways that might happen and sums it up. Money is then made not merely by taking a profit in the market, but through profiteering by rent seeking using this monopoly or oligopoly. So now that we have a good idea of what these people are saying, let's get three things clear. One, I have an a priori objection to capitalism. I don't just focus on capitalism's consequences on this channel, I think it's a messed up idea at its core. Capitalism, crony or not, is an economic system where a tiny, unelected minority of people get the vast majority of people to work for them so that they can get wealthier. You might think that's alright, I happen to think it's wrong. The place we spend most of our waking hours is run by a guy who has to prioritize profit over everything else, including the well-being of the people that work there. Under capitalism, you have the choice between working for the unelected guy, beating the odds and becoming the unelected guy yourself, or starving. None of that particularly appeals to me. I also happen to think that business acumen shouldn't be a justification for power. Just because Elon Musk is a business super genius, just look at how well he's handling Twitter, doesn't mean his decisions should matter more. The same way that the divine right of kings was a BS justification for feudalism. I think democracy should apply to the economy. Crony or not, capitalism isn't something I support. Two, the things that ANCAPs and libertarians complain about with crony capitalism, like monopolies and oligopolies, companies that can basically get away with whatever they want, are natural consequences of the pure free market capitalism they defend. When companies ruin competition, it's not necessarily because of something the state does. Free market competition always leads to this scenario where a few corporations dominate and extract rent. Monopolies inevitably develop within capitalism, and whether they got that status with the help of the state or on their own doesn't matter. They are still a monopoly. They still do whatever they want. It still sucks. Three, there's no such thing as a free market in the first place. The distinction between crony capitalism and pure capitalism is based on the vague idea that crony capitalism is when government too big. At some point, one that is impossible to precisely define, there's too much state intervention and that's why it all goes wrong. At least that's the idea. ANCAPs incorrectly believe that there is such a thing as capitalism without a state, and libertarians are vague about the amount of state intervention they deem to be okay. And as a result, anytime something bad happens, it can just be chalked up to too much intervention, called crony capitalism, and they continue to clamor for small government. But there is no such thing as markets without a state or without intervention, because markets don't exist in their own little world. All capitalism will involve state intervention. That intervention will necessarily benefit some at the expense of others. Companies will always find ways to influence that process to their benefit by using strategies like capital flight or capital strikes. And that means capitalism will always inevitably be crony. Therefore, the distinction doesn't matter. Let's start with a point about monopolies. Regardless of state intervention, collusion, or whatever, monopolies are an inevitable feature of capitalism. And that's because all companies want to monopolize. When it comes to making more profits than everybody else, which is the prime directive of every single capitalist, becoming a monopoly is clearly the way to go. When you're a monopoly, or don't have meaningful competition, prices are whatever you say they are, work conditions are whatever you decide them to be, and profit margins are pretty much up to you. Every company is gunning for the #1 spot, and in a competitive market, somebody will eventually get it. It's a zero-sum game. If you are less profitable than your competition, only a couple things can happen. You will gradually either be phased out and fail, because your competition attracts more investors who just follow the higher rate of returns, or your competition will buy you out before that happens. And if horizontal integration isn't an option, companies will integrate vertically and own every part of the manufacturing process to run a leaner business. As they get larger, whether they acquire vertically or horizontally, companies benefit from economies of scale. They have better prices because they buy in bulk or control production from the start. They have more money to invest into R&D to stay ahead of the pack. And they have a bigger market share thanks to a more powerful advertising strategy. The rich get richer, and what starts out as a fair competition rapidly descends into monopoly or oligopoly once someone gets an edge and the means to hold onto it. Google and Facebook aren't going anywhere anytime soon because they have hundreds of mergers and acquisitions under their belts. And just look at Walmart. It starts out with a single local store, then it becomes a couple stores in a few towns, then a couple hundred. And soon enough, over 2 million people are working for the same company, making so little that even full-time workers need to be on food stamps. Mom and pop shops can't compete with their low prices. At the end of the day, monopoly or oligopoly is inevitable when there are winners and losers in a competitive market, because the winners take over what they used to share or compete over with the losers. Antitrust regulation makes this a little better, but that's state intervention, so not a great argument against crony capitalism. And even with antitrust laws in place, oligopolies form all over our economy. Big tech is dominated by just a few corporations. So is mass media, telecommunications. Online shopping happens almost exclusively on Amazon. And of course, the food and beverage business is dominated by just a handful of brands. In theory, innovation is supposed to combat this effect a little bit. But now that tech startups have realized it's more profitable to be bought out by Meta than foolishly try to outcompete it, innovation isn't going to change all that much either. Only massive breakthroughs can change the hierarchy, the way the internet did in the late 90s and early 2000s. But whether IBM or Google is on top doesn't matter if it's still an oligopolistic system. It's still gonna suck. There is no version of capitalism that respects competition, but not competition's outcomes. If your idea is to turn the clock back to when there was more competition, it'll only be a matter of time until we're right back here. It's not a solution. So now let's talk about state intervention and regulation. There's no capitalism without a state, and no avoiding collusion between the state and corporations. The prime function of the state in a capitalist society is creating an environment where businesses are profitable. The state depends on the profit of the capitalist class. It delegates the responsibility of organizing the economy to capitalists. And in turn, capitalists depend on the state to make sure that the conditions are right for them to profit. At the most basic level, that means the state needs to be there to enforce contracts. In the background of every business contract, there is the state to make sure both parties follow through. Behind the ownership of a business, there is also the state, making sure that someone with a stockpile of guns doesn't knock on the door and take it over. The police and the legal systems are there to provide a baseline arrangement to make sure that violence between capitalists doesn't happen outside the rules of business. But now, what counts as the rules of business? Those have to be defined. Is it state intervention if the government finds a company for taking over another one the wrong way? That's a tricky question. It's not clear what it means to uphold private property rights in practice. And what about intellectual property? In some places, the state protects patents, and in others it doesn't, because for some countries, it's more profitable not to enforce them. Isn't the state intervening in the economy as soon as it makes that decision? The reason you could argue it either way is because there are no natural conditions on which to base an economy. Economies have to be created. States in the past couple hundred years since capitalism began have had to and still continue to make decisions. They facilitate trade by creating a currency, taxing in that currency to give it value, setting rules for proper engagement, and enforcing those rules. In short, they need to intervene because without their intervention, there'd be no economy to speak of. If you go one level deeper, the state's intervention is absolutely necessary to maintain the exploitation of people under capitalism. Capitalism is incredibly exploitative and incredibly unequal. Most people work long hours and live right on the edge of poverty, while a tiny minority work no hours and fly their private jets to their 5th mansion. In order to keep this machine turning and stop it from imploding on itself French Revolution style, you need a state to shape the cultural consensus that capitalism is valid and necessary, and a police force and legal system to give muscle to the enforcement of capitalist relations. If I had to summarize that with just 2 quotes, the industrial laborer works for and is exploited by the factory owner. And when he organizes in opposition, in comes the policeman who breaks his bones, the sheriff who evicts him, and the judge who jails him. And accumulation, because it is based on exploitation, cannot be sustained at the level of the individual producer-employer alone. It requires legal, ideological, and cultural institutions. It needs state organs and other power organizations. It has to be framed, shaped, and contained from above. In short, it requires the political power of a nation-state. So now that the state exists, and it has to for capitalism to continue, how are capitalists going to take advantage of it? Are they going to finance the campaigns of the candidates they like, collude with politicians and make shadowy deals, become elected themselves and go through the revolving door so that they can run the country in whatever way helps their business? Sure, they could do all that, and they do, but they don't have to get the same results. If businesses are unhappy with something the government is doing, they just stop investing and the economy goes into a tailspin. No need to influence the government in a crude way. Capitalists just go on an investment strike or they simply invest in another country. The government tends to want to avoid that, so it usually doesn't even get to that point. And just like that, the state and businesses colluded without anyone accusing them of cronyism. Some businesses will benefit from it, others won't. The outcome is the same as if there had been a bribe or an exclusive contract, except this is real capitalism because all the state did was guarantee the conditions for profitability, which any libertarian will tell you it should. Ultimately, as long as you have private property, the profit motive, and wage labor, you have capitalism. That those basic elements lead to objectionable things doesn't make them any less capitalistic. Capitalism isn't a neutral economic system. It always ultimately favors those who sit at its helm. So when that means screwing over the vast majority of people, that is always the direction it will go. As one final analogy, and this is how I usually explain it to commenters, you wouldn't call stage 4 cancer a different disease than cancer. It's simply the progression of the same disease. No matter what perverse, mutated versions of capitalism appear, if the economic base remains the same, if the profit motive is still the driving force, we live under capitalism. You can call it what you want, but that won't change reality, nor will it solve the problem. The problem is capitalism. I mentioned at the beginning of this video.
Alright. So I didn't feel like I learned anything new, but more pleasant video on that one. Let's see if there's anything else to watch. You know what? Just video games then. Oh wait. Tim Pool has more videos. I like him.
Zuby, eat your heart out. Take a look at this story. Pulling his weight. Male powerlifter protests Canada's woke gender self-ID laws by saying he's a woman, then entering female contest and smashing bench press record. Bravo. Bearded Avi Silverberg, who shattered the women's bench press record. Now, of course, you all know that it was Zuby who several years ago, man, has it been that long? Broke the, what did he break, the deadlift record? Now, he didn't literally, well, I should say he literally did. He broke the record. He lifted more than the strongest female deadlifter. Zuby did a deadlift, but identifying as a woman, thus, he is the best women's deadlifter ever. And it became a viral story. Well, now we have someone doing something very similar. They write, this is the moment a male coach claims to be a woman and smashes the female bench press record at a powerlifting competition in Canada. Bearded Avi Silverberg is shown calmly approaching the bench in men's clothing as part of a protest against gender self-identification policies in sport. Silverberg then unofficially breaks the female bench press record for the 84 plus kilograms women's category, which was a 270-pound press, officially set by a trans lifter. Really? Now that adds more to the story. The move, which took place Saturday at the Heroes Classic tournament in Lethbridge, Alberta, was apparently designed to protest rules outlined by the Canadian Powerlifting Union. Silverberg has yet to comment on his decision to enter the contest and subsequent victory. So they say unofficial, but it sounds like this was actually an official contest he entered and won. The Canadian rules allow anybody who self-identifies as a woman to compete in the female category, sparking concerns trans women who've gone through male puberty may have considerable physical advantage over biological female rivals. This melts my brain. I am tired of hearing it. You know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of conservative outlets saying assault rifle. Google it. And I am tired of outlets saying male puberty, prenatal testosterone has a tremendous impact on collagen and fast versus slow twitch muscle development, period. End of story. Puberty has nothing to do with it. Now, to be fair, puberty does play a role, of course. But I always want to ask these people this. It was a 12-year-old boy who performed the first skateboarding 1080 spin. No female has ever done a 720. And don't give me that Sky Adams or whoever did a 720 flyout. Flyouts are not the same thing. And this is what really annoys me. It was a big deal, what was it, like 10 or 15 years ago, when a woman did the first 540 spin on a skateboard. A female did a first 540 spin. Men have been doing 540 spins on skateboards since like the late 70s, early 80s. And then I think it was in the 80s, Tony Hawk did the first 720 spin by going fakie, which means going backwards, and it adds, when you snap that rotation, an extra 180 degrees. Eventually, skateboarders got to the point where they could do a standard, a straightforward, goofy, or regular stance 720, which means you go up, spin twice, and then come back down backwards. It was a big deal in 1999 when Tony Hawk landed the first 900-degree spin. I believe he was 32 years old. And then, in I think it may have been like 8 years ago now, a 12-year-old boy on a mega ramp performed the first 1080 spin. But a mega ramp is massive, 20 feet. This gave more time for someone to perform the spin. Of course, I believe it was then a 10-year-old boy who recently, in the past couple of years, performed the first 1080 spin on a standard half pipe. Where are the girls? Where are the girls? These are prepubescent boys. Of course, then a dude performed a 1260, and like no one really cared all that much, which is kind of sad. But anyway, I digress. It's not about puberty. Puberty does play a role for sure, but where are the girls performing these spins? There is a young girl named, I believe Sky Adams is her name, I could be wrong, who's performed what's called a flyout. A flyout is when you go up a quarter pipe and launch out of the ramp to the flat ground. Whereas typically when you perform the spin, you go up the ramp and back into the ramp. It's much more difficult. Flyouts, sorry, in my opinion, are very easy. They're very, very easy. It's launching a flat ground. And someone says, a girl's done a 720, the first girl to ever do a 720, and it's just like, dude, come on. That's not, we have a, so what? The standards for boys and girls are different? Ah, that's what they do. And I wonder why. They're going to say, the CPU released its trans inclusion policy in February, which was based on guidance from the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport. Silverberg smashed the record set by transgender powerlifter Anne Andres, who has previously mocked women for being so bad at bench pressing. Why is women's bench so bad, she said in February. I mean, not compared to me. We all know, I'm not going to repeat what they said, but they said something rather offensive. Doesn't count. I mean, standard bench in powerlifting competitions for women, I literally don't understand why it's so bad. She made the statements in a video uploaded online. At the time, Riley Gaines, a spokeswoman for the Independent Women's Forum and competitive swimmer, who was beaten by trans athlete Leah Thomas, hit out at Andre. She wrote on Twitter, Anne Andre, male who identifies and competes as a woman, doesn't understand why female powerlifters are so bad at bench press. Here's the dude. Sorry, the lady. This it's very much like that episode of South Park, I'm sorry to say. This is, who is this one? Silverberg unofficially broke the record for the 84-plus kilogram women's category. Why is it unofficial? How is it unofficial? He entered the contest, right? Quote, well, I don't know, Anne, but maybe it's because you have 20 times more testosterone than them, just a thought. Icons Women, a campaign group dedicated to defending the rights of female athletes in single-sex sport, posted the clip of Silverberg on their Twitter account. The issue of allowing transgender athletes to compete in women's sport has become increasingly contentious after a series of high-profile cases. In 2022, transgender swimmer Leah Thomas divided the sports community after spending 3 years on the University of Pennsylvania's men's swimming team. Thomas, who is 6'3", came back for her final year as a female swimmer and breaking records in the pool. No, not female, male. That's fine. You can say women's team, that's the game they're playing. How about this? The female team is for females and the male team is for males, and I don't care what you identify as. She beat Gaines, who has since become an outspoken advocate for protecting female spaces in sport. Gaines took objection not only to Thomas's unfair advantage having been born a man, but also claimed it made her feel uncomfortable in the locker room. Quote, you have someone with male genitalia pulling his pants down, watching you as you undress, it throws you off. Yikes. Here's Icons Women saying, trans-identifying male Anne Andre in Alberta is Alberta Canadians women's powerlifting record holder in bench. Competes next month in women's category at the 2023 CPU National Championships, recognizes no understanding of upper body strength differences between males and females. Yeah, well, you know. In 2021, New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard qualified for the Tokyo Olympics despite being nearly twice the age of her female rivals. You know, look, I'm gonna come out and say this. I'm not saying to be a dick or anything. I am 37. I have been skateboarding since I was about 13. I don't skateboard as often as I used to, but still pretty good. I can do nollie hard flip, late flips, and if this goes over your head, that's kind of the point. I will use as much jargon as possible so you can understand. Nollie flip, no slide, nollie flip out. I can do switch blunt, switch heel. I can do 540 big flips, and you're probably thinking like, wait, what are all these things? Yeah, I'm decently good at skateboarding, but I would never rank in any capacity men's sporting category. I think the best I've ever placed was like 9th out of 25. And I'm not bad. I'm just not a pro. Pretty good. One of the best in my area. Had some sponsorships back in the day.
Do you need me?
If I decided to enter a women's skateboarding contest as a dude, I would probably hit the podium. In fact, I gotta be honest, at 37, which is like, yo, I'm over the hill in terms of pro sports. You give me 6 months, I could probably win a women's competition. And to be fair, I'm not saying any guy could do it. I'm not saying you could take any guy at 37, hand him a skateboard, say, learn to skate. No, that wouldn't work. I'm saying, like, there's no way I would ever get anywhere. I'm not going to be even board sliding the Hollywood High 16, okay? You know, maybe if I had to, I would, what could I probably do? Front feeble down to 12. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'm old. If I had to, could probably do a feeble or front feeble down to 16. The physical capability is there. The will was never there. I've never done anything that big. I've skated like 13 stairs before. Tray flips, switch hard flips off of obstacles, kick flip, late heel flip. You can look these things up. You can look up my skateboarding stuff. You can look up Tim Pool, kick back flip down a 5 stair, a small little stair set at a skate park. If I really wanted to, I could go out, train for 6 months, and then probably get first place in a contest against women. I'm not saying it to disparage women. I'm not saying to say that they're bad. I'm saying they have their own space for a reason. And it is fair to say that I may not be the best, but I'm certainly not the worst skateboarder. There are many skateboarders, I probably know 1,000, who are nowhere near good enough to be pro, but would win a women's skateboarding contest. Like, it's just not even a question, man. It's not even a question. I wonder, I don't know why, but I have theories. I think when you look at skateboarding, the difference between males and females is so tremendously pronounced, it's insane. It's just absolutely insane. Granted, there are some really, really good female skateboarders. No question. But I just think, for me as an athlete, I just look at this and I'm like, dude, no question. None. So this is where we're headed. Congratulations to this woman right here for breaking the record. Good job, sir. Yeah, all right. That's what you want to be? I don't see why we'd go anywhere else. And I don't see why this guy isn't the record holder if he says he's a woman. If she. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes. Stick around and I'll see you all shortly.
Tell me. All the way. For the humans!
Attention.
All right.
Building completed.
Sorry, sir. I was cleaning my weapon. Bring 'em on! Perfect. Reporting for duty. Tell me. Come on.
Units under attack.
You are gonna pay me for this, right? Great. Yeah, roger that. Okay, but it's gonna cost you double.
Orders, sir. All the way.
Gotcha. Aren't there other units to bother?
Attention.
Whatever you say.
Building completed.
As long as you pay me.
At your service. Understood.
What? Gotcha. Great. Gotcha. Roger that. Great.
Our soldiers are in trouble.
Tell me. Perfect.
Our forces are in danger.
gonna pay me for this, right? You again. Are you sure? Right between the eyes. Roger that. Gotcha.
At your service.
They are trying to break into the buildings.
Understood. Come on.
The walls
On your
are under
reporting
attack.
for duty. Come on. Let's go.
They are trying to break through.
All right. Great idea, sir. Let's go. Perfect. Tell me. Orders, sir.
They are
On your
attacking
orders.
the colony defenses.
That will be easy. All right. Understood. That will be easy. All right. Understood.
What? Okay.
Any orders? Orders, sir. Let's go.
Our
Understood.
defenses are being attacked.
Perfect. That will be easy. Come on. Perfect. Commander? Great idea, sir.
The walls are under attack.
Of course, my commander. Come on. Let's go. Any orders? Great idea, sir.
They are
Of
trying
course,
to break
my
through.
commander. Understood.
You again. What?
Tell me. All right.
They are attacking the colony defenses.
Understood.
You are gonna pay me for this, right? You order, you pay. Okay, you call that a plan? Yes. Are you sure? You order, you pay. Okay. Are you sure? Yes.
Reporting for
Yeah.
duty.
Great.
Okay. Back under control.
What do you want now?
Any orders? Of course, my commander. All right. Understood. All right. Reporting for duty. Tell me.
new task. Roger that. Okay, let's do this. Order,
Attention.
you
Building completed. The train has arrived at the station.
What? Okay, gotcha. You call that a plan?
Do you need me? Reporting for duty. Just tell me what to do. Tell me. Understood. Come on. Waiting on orders. Do you need me? Reporting for duty.
Attention. Building completed.
Orders, sir. Of course, my commander. Tell me.
Flip my mind.
Commander? Any orders? Just tell me what to do. For the colony! Let's go. Great idea,
Attention.
sir.
Building completed.
Tell me. Reporting for duty. Ready and waiting. Come on. That will be easy. All right. Let's go.
What's up? Any infected around? I hope you're not wasting my time. Yeah, you order, you pay.
Attention. Building completed.
Any orders?
The train has arrived at the
Perfect.
station.
For the colony!
Attention. Building
Let's go.
completed.
Reporting for duty.
Having an obscene amount of food.
tell me what to do. All right.
Straight to the heart.
Understood. Of course, my commander. At your service. All right. For the humans! Great ideas, sir. All right. Understood. Come on. Just tell me what to do. Reporting for duty. All the way. Let's go.
Building completed. Attention.
All
Building
the way.
completed.
Perfect.
Oh, it's too late to build. I don't want to.
Are y'all ready for this one?
Okay.
Major
so
Australian bank
gonna
to
watch
end
this video
cash
and
withdrawals from its branches as the end of paper notes looms.
All right.
The central bank digital
Yeah.
currency is coming. They will know
We
it.
already have digital currency, and I don't see it as bad as a thing as most conservatives.
Everything you buy, everyone you interact with, and there is nothing you can do about it.
Cleaning my weapon.
Maybe. Even with Bitcoin, they can track what you do. Here's the story. One of Australia's biggest banks has confirmed that some of its branches will no longer allow customers to withdraw money over the counter. ANZ Bank is stripping back some of its services, with certain branches no longer carrying physical cash. Instead, customers will be directed to ATMs if they wish to withdraw money, even though these machines are also being cut down across the country. It is happening. My suggestion? You want to have some cash on hand. I would say that the US dollar is not particularly valuable at this point, and I'm actually quite worried about holding some. So me personally, I'm not going to give you any advice. You having cash is your own cash. Having it physically, that's on you. I won't give you investment or financial advice. I'll tell you this. I am buying Bitcoin. Not that I think it's an end-all be-all. I've also got physical gold and silver and cash. But I think holding US dollars is a really, really bad idea because inflation is getting worse.
I don't
So me
have enough
personally,
US
I will be
dollars for that
hedging
to
that
even
bet.
matter.
They go on to say, customers will be directed to ATMs. ANZ said that only 8% of its customers rely on banks for their money as more and more Australians switch to internet banking. However, critics have warned this could cause significant harm to older people and those with disabilities who still rely on physical cash. But this is how they make the changes. They do it slow. Old people die. They make it harder for younger people, accessible for older people, and when the older people die off, they will get rid of it all. You will be using a central bank digital currency. There will likely be, the theory right now is there will be a banking collapse, and then when your bank collapses, because we're seeing all of these banking collapses in the United States, they'll say, your money is safe, you can get it, just download Fed app, enter your information to log in, and you will get access to your dollars. Now, we've replaced your dollars with central bank digital currency known as FedCoin. And they'll call it USD coin or something like that. I think there already is one, but they'll call it something like that. And they'll say it's the same thing as your normal money. It's right there and available, and it can only be accessed through this app. Don't worry, we saved you. That's how they'll phrase it. They say, the number of bank branches in Australia has fallen by about 30% in the last 5 years.
Forgot about that.
A trend that has been mirrored across the world. And ATMs have decreased even more, with figures showing that they have fallen from a high of 14,000 in 2017 to around 6,000 as of last year. On Wednesday, it was revealed that cash transactions are dying in Australia, with just 13% of purchases now using banknotes or coins. Tap-and-go cards, mobile payments, and direct online transfers make up the rest of all transactions, with the share of cash purchases halving in just 3 years. The Reserve Bank estimated just 13% of transactions in late 2022 were in cash, a halving in just 3 years since the start of the pandemic. Contactless tap-and-go payments, where customers use their mobile smartphone, made up a third of transactions, with younger consumers more likely to pay this way. We've also seen another funny video, where a woman walks into, I think it's a Whole Foods, I'm not sure, and she scans her hand, inputs her credit card, and then it links the credit card with her handprint.
Revelations, Bibles much?
And when she goes to check out, she scans her hand. Welcome to the future, ladies and gentlemen. And they will shut this stuff off. They can already shut off your credit card. They can already freeze your bank account. But they can't stop you from spending money in cash. And they can't snap their fingers and tell everyone, don't accept cash from this person. But if you get rid of cash, they will ice you out. And if you have a bad social credit score, you won't be able to buy food anymore because your CBDC has shut down. That's the future they have in store for you. ANZ Royal Bank. Cybersecurity expert Ben Britton, who works as chief information security officer, said a cyber attack could stop the major banks from conducting electronic transactions linked to their EFT POS terminals. That entire system is dependent on an internet connection to work. So if there's any interruption in the internet connection, the people will not be able to make any payment, he told Daily Mail Australia. If there was a major cyber attack, if there was a vulnerability within the terminal and it was exploited, then they could potentially shut down every terminal in the entire country. This could occur if hackers figured out how to exploit a banking computer code. Let me tell you a story, my friends. I remember a couple years ago, it happens periodically, but a couple years ago, I went to, I think it was like a cafe, and they said, our internet is down and we can't accept credit cards. And I went, I don't have any cash on. And they were like, sorry, cash only. You can maybe go find an ATM. And I was like, I guess I'll go somewhere else. We're opening a coffee shop in West Virginia. Become a member at timcast.com and check out castbrew.com if you want to buy our coffee. Pre-orders are available today. We'll ship by May 5th. Could be earlier, but I believe May 5th is the date. And you can get our Rise with Roberto Jr. We're launching a coffee shop. We've had a conversation about cash. And we said, initially, like maybe because of the strain, we just want to do a cashless terminal. And the immediate reaction from everybody was, you have to take cash. You have to. Because if we start walking down this path of saying, you know what, it's easier not to take cash, you don't get robbed, and it's harder to do bank drops, we're playing right into their hands. Cash is important. The ability to trade person to person. If we keep pushing towards a digital reality, we will be under the boot of a centralized hub. And we're still, excuse me, it could come to the point where it's an AI, where you simply have an algorithmic AI that decides you should not be allowed to buy. I suppose there is one net positive. Imagine this.
If we have an actual AI, it's not going to act like that.
A morbidly obese
BIs, on the other hand, would.
Person waddles their way into a McDonald's and says, I'd like to buy. A morbidly obese person waddles their way into a McDonald's and says, I'd like to buy 5 Big Macs. And then they go, okay, that'll be $25.37. Well, at that point, it'll be like $57.89, sir. And then, boop, boop, I can't buy it. And then the computer says, you're too fat, you can't eat any more food. Calm down, go home. I'm half kidding, by the way. As much as I'm not thrilled with the morbid obesity of America, the idea of telling people what they can and can't have, curtailing the rights of the healthy because of the unhealthy, doesn't seem to make sense. I don't have all the solutions.
Kick the hornet's nest.
All I know
Let's
is
go.
It's happening. This is the news right here. So there are a bunch of alternatives that people are talking about, cryptocurrencies, so that you can be off of their central bank digital currency, but that's still digital currency. If you're using Bitcoin, which I think is fantastic, and I have some, you still need the internet. Now, theoretically, there are offline ways to transfer Bitcoin. You could put it on a drive, you could give someone the drive, you could verify the amount of coin, that Bitcoin that's on it, and then physically hand it to somebody, things like that. Theoretically, you could do an RFID physical Bitcoin that contains the information, but you still basically need the internet to verify the transaction on the blockchain. So I'm not convinced that Bitcoin is the absolute solution. I think hard currency might be it. But you know what? Doesn't matter if it's the dollar or the Australian dollar. The central banks control the value essentially, and they can print whatever they want. So maybe then the only solution is physical gold and silver. And of course I'm saying this understanding that physical gold and silver only have value so long as the system exists. In which case, Me personally, because I'm not going to give you advice. I have emergency food, emergency water. I have weapons. You know what's going to be worth if a system really does collapse? You know what's going to have value? Bullets. It's a scary thought. I don't know if you guys have ever played the game Fallout 3, or Fallout for that matter. They trade in bottle caps. Bottle caps become currency. And I'm like, it's a funny thought, but why would it be? Why would bottle caps become currency? I guess it's just something of value. You can scrounge around and find some, and it's scarce enough, but discoverable. And so it's a representation of value between people. They're willing to accept bottle caps. Whatever. Bottle caps, a funny thought, huh? Because they're almost like coins. Why would it not just be bullets? Something someone could actually use. I guess because, I don't know, it's fantasy. But the reality is, I think a bullet would have a universal use. It's small enough, it's lightweight enough, and it has a function and a purpose. Meaning that no matter what it is you're trying to trade for or trade, you know, whether it's bullets or otherwise, you know someone else is going to want that thing. Food spoils. You know, water can become stagnant. But weapons, especially ammunition, I don't see gold or silver being valuable beyond a collapse because they don't do anything. So you will have something of value, like maybe a press to make bullets, to make ammo, but you're not going to hand that to somebody. I mean, you can trade something now. You can trade a washing machine for a lawnmower, who knows? But in the immediate, to hand someone something. So the joke I had, we were thinking about doing a bit, is someone like ordering a pizza, and then they're like, that'll be, that'll be X grains, sir. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll pull out 250 BMG. Can you make change for 50 BMG? Yes. Then he hands him the 50 BMG, and the guy pulls out some 9mm and some 5.56 and hands him change back. I don't know if that will ever be the case. However, I can tell you this right now. They're getting rid of cash, and you won't be able to buy things off of their grid. Pay attention. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.
Any orders? Orders, sir. Commander? Come on. All right. Just guide me to the infected.
And done. Right in time to finish the video. Alright.